The billionaire's mascara streaked down her face as she collapsed on the frozen Chicago sidewalk, her designer gown torn and stained. Daniel Hayes, exhausted from his third rideshare shift that week, never imagined that helping this broken woman would lead to a marriage proposal just 7 days later. But when you're a struggling single dad and she's about to lose her empire without a husband, desperate times call for the most unexpected alliances. Dear viewers, follow me through this incredible journey of two broken souls finding each other in the most unlikely circumstances. And please, comment below which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the world. The dashboard clock glowed 11:47 p.m. as Daniel Hayes rubbed his tired eyes, willing himself to stay alert for just one more fare. 3 more rides, he told himself, and he could call it a night. The math was simple and cruel. Each ride meant another $10 or $15 toward Max's school supplies, toward keeping the electricity on, toward the mountain of medical bills that still arrived monthly like clockwork, 2 years after Sarah's death. Chicago in February was unforgiving, and tonight was no exception. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees, and even with the heater running full blast, Daniel could feel the cold seeping through the worn seals of his 2015 Honda Accord. He'd bought it used 3 years ago when life was different, when Sarah was still alive and they'd needed a reliable family car. Now it was his office, his lifeline, the barrier between stability and complete financial ruin. His phone buzzed with another ride request. Daniel glanced at the pickup location, the Magnolia Tower, one of those gleaming skyscrapers in the Loop where people paid more in monthly HOA fees than he made in a year. He accepted without hesitation. Rich passengers usually tipped well, especially late at night when they'd been drinking. The drive from his current location in Lincoln Park took 15 minutes. Daniel used the time to check his phone at red lights, looking at the photo he kept as his wallpaper, Max grinning, gap-toothed at the camera, holding up his latest science project. 8 years old and already talking about becoming an astronomer. The kid was brilliant, scary brilliant, the kind of brilliant that made Daniel simultaneously proud and terrified because he knew he couldn't afford the kind of education Max deserved. As he turned onto Michigan Avenue, the Magnolia Tower rose before him like a monument to everything he'd never have. 68 floors of glass and steel, with a lobby that probably cost more to decorate than his entire apartment building was worth. He pulled up to the valet area, hazard lights blinking, and scanned for his passenger. That's when he saw her. At first, Daniel thought it was a pile of fabric someone had dropped, maybe dry cleaning that had fallen from a car. But then the fabric moved, and he realized with a start that it was a woman, slumped against the building's marble facade, barely conscious. He threw the car into park and jumped out, the cold hitting him like a physical blow. As he got closer, the scene became more surreal. The woman was wearing what must have been a $10,000 evening gown, emerald green silk that caught the light from the street lamps. But the dress was torn at the shoulder, stained with what looked like red wine, and her feet, Jesus, her feet were bare, her designer shoes nowhere to be seen. "Ma'am!" Daniel knelt beside her, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She lifted her head slowly, and even in her disheveled state, she was striking. High cheekbones, dark hair that had probably been in an elegant updo hours ago, but now hung in tangled waves around her shoulders. Her makeup was ruined, mascara creating dark rivers down her cheeks, lipstick smeared like she'd been crying against her hands. "I'm fine," she slurred, trying to push herself up and failing spectacularly. Perfectly fine." The smell of alcohol was overwhelming, not just wine, but whiskey, champagne, the kind of mixing that only happened at corporate events where the bar was open and the pressure was high. "You're not fine," Daniel said firmly. "You're drunk and it's 12 degrees out here. Where are your shoes?" She looked down at her feet as if noticing for the first time that they were bare. "Bradley took them," she said, and then laughed. A broken sound that was more sob than humor. "Said I couldn't run away in heels. Joke's on him. I can't run barefoot either." Daniel's jaw clenched. He didn't know who Bradley was, but any man who would leave a woman shoeless in February deserved a special place in hell. "Is Bradley your husband? Boyfriend?" "Business partner." She spat the words like they tasted bitter. "Ex-business partner. As of..." She squinted at a watch that probably cost more than his car. 2 hours ago. A security guard emerged from the building's lobby, looking annoyed. "Sir, you can't park there. This is a loading zone. I'm picking up a passenger," Daniel said, gesturing to the woman. The guard's expression shifted when he saw her. "Miss Mercer?" "Oh my God, Miss Mercer. Should I call an ambulance?" Miss Mercer. The name tickled something in Daniel's memory, but he couldn't place it. "No ambulance," the woman, Miss Mercer, said with surprising clarity. "No hospitals." No anything. I just need to go home." "I can take you home," Daniel offered. "That's literally my job. I'm a rideshare driver." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and even through the alcohol haze her eyes were sharp, assessing. They were green, he noticed, almost the same shade as her ruined dress. "You're not my driver," she said slowly. "I didn't call anyone." "No, but I'm here, and you need help." Daniel stood, offering her his hand. "Look, I've got a son at home. I know what it's like to have a rough night. Let me help you get somewhere safe." She stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment, then placed her own in it. Her fingers were ice cold, and he could feel her trembling. Whether from cold or emotion, he couldn't tell. It took both Daniel and the security guard to get her to her feet. She swayed dangerously, and Daniel instinctively wrapped an arm around her waist to steady her. "Where do you live?" he asked. "Penthouse," she mumbled against his shoulder. "Top floor." The security guard shook his head. "The elevators are on maintenance lockdown after midnight tonight, Miss Mercer." "Building notice went out last week." She laughed again, that broken sound. "Of course they are. Of course they fucking are. Is there somewhere else you can go?" Daniel asked. "A friend's place?" "Hotel?" "Hotel," she repeated, and the irony in her voice was thick enough to cut. "Yes, let's go to a hotel." "That's perfect, absolutely perfect." Daniel helped her to his car, practically carrying her the last few steps. The security guard held the door as Daniel maneuvered her into the back seat. "Take care of her," the guard said quietly. She's good people. Whatever happened tonight, she didn't deserve it." Daniel nodded, closing the door gently. He got back in the driver's seat and turned to look at his unexpected passenger. She was slumped against the window, eyes closed, breathing shallow but steady. "Which hotel?" he asked. No response. "Ma'am?" "Miss Mercer? I need to know where to take you." Still nothing. She was out cold. Daniel sat there for a moment, weighing his options. He could take her to the nearest hotel, but in her condition, they might not let her check in. He could go to a hospital, but she'd specifically said no hospitals. He could call the police, but that felt like a betrayal of the trust she'd shown by getting in his car. His phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen. "Max is asleep. I can stay until 1 a.m. but need to leave for my shift after that." Shit. He had 45 minutes to figure this out and get home. Making a decision he'd probably regret, Daniel started driving toward his apartment in Humboldt Park. It wasn't the best neighborhood, certainly nothing like wherever Ms. Mercer probably lived, but it was safe enough. He'd let her sleep it off on his couch, and in the morning, when she was sober, he'd drive her wherever she needed to go. The 20-minute drive felt like an hour. Every red light, he checked the rearview mirror, making sure she was still breathing. She'd started snoring softly somewhere around Division Street, and the sound was oddly reassuring. His building was a converted 3-flat from the 1920s, brick and sturdy, but showing its age. The front steps were salted but still treacherous with patches of ice. Daniel parked in his usual spot, the one with the broken streetlight that nobody else wanted, and came around to the back door. "Miss Mercer?" He touched her shoulder gently. "We're here. I need you to wake up enough to walk." She stirred, blinking owlishly. "Where?" "My place, just for tonight. You can sleep it off and figure things out in the morning." She should have been alarmed, should have questioned why a strange man was taking her to his apartment. Instead, she just nodded and held out her arms like a child wanting to be picked up. Daniel half carried her up the 3 flights of stairs, grateful that most of his neighbors worked night shifts and wouldn't be around to see this. The last thing he needed was gossip about bringing home a drunk woman in a torn evening gown. Mrs. Chen was sitting on his couch, knitting and watching a Korean drama on her tablet with subtitles. She looked up when Daniel entered, her eyes widening at the sight of his companion. "This is a friend," Daniel said quickly. "She needed help." "Is Max—" "Sound asleep," Mrs. Chen assured him, gathering her things with the efficiency of someone who'd raised 4 kids of her own. "I gave him dinner and helped with his homework." "That boy, he's too smart for his own good, asking me about black holes and event horizons." She paused at the door, looking back at the semi-conscious woman Daniel was supporting. "You be careful, Daniel." "I'm just helping," he said. "That's all." Mrs. Chen's expression said she wasn't entirely convinced, but she left without further comment. Daniel's apartment was small but clean. He made sure of that for Max's sake. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a combined living room and kitchen that served as the heart of their little home. The walls were covered with Max's drawings and school awards, star charts and NASA posters. He deposited Ms. Mercer on the couch, which had seen better days but was still comfortable. She curled up immediately, pulling her knees to her chest, the expensive fabric of her dress pooling around her like liquid emerald. Daniel grabbed a blanket from the closet and draped it over her, then went to the kitchen to fill a glass with water. He found the bottle of aspirin in the cabinet above the sink and shook out 3 tablets, leaving them on the coffee table with the water where she'd see them when she woke up. He should have left it at that. Should have gone to bed and dealt with the situation in the morning. But something made him pause, looking down at her. Even passed out drunk, there was something dignified about her, something that suggested she wasn't used to being vulnerable. The tear tracks on her face had dried, but he could see the pain etched in the lines around her eyes, the kind of pain that came from more than just a bad business meeting. Daniel knew that pain. He saw it in his own mirror every morning. On impulse, he went to his room and grabbed an old pair of Sarah's fuzzy socks from the drawer he still couldn't bring himself to clean out. Ms. Mercer's feet were purple with cold, and he carefully slipped the socks on, trying not to wake her. She stirred slightly, mumbling something that sounded like "thank you," but could have been anything. Daniel grabbed a pillow and a spare blanket for himself and settled into the armchair across from the couch. He'd sleep there tonight, just in case she woke up sick or confused. It wouldn't be the first night he'd slept in that chair. During Sarah's chemo, when she couldn't make it to the bedroom, he'd spent countless nights there, watching her sleep, praying for a miracle that never came. As he drifted off, he wondered who Ms. Mercer really was. What had happened to leave her so broken on that sidewalk? He wondered if she had anyone who cared that she hadn't come home, anyone who would worry. Morning came too soon, announced by Max's alarm clock at 6:30 a.m. Daniel jerked awake, his neck stiff from the awkward position. The couch was empty, the blanket folded neatly, the water glass empty. The only sign that Ms. Mercer had been there at all was a note written on the back of one of Max's school permission slips. "Thank you for your kindness. I'm sorry for the imposition." Oh. Next to the note was a small pile of cash, $500 bills, crisp and new. Daniel stared at the money, his first instinct to be offended. He wasn't a charity case. But then he thought about Max's school fees, about the electricity bill marked "Final Notice" stuck to his refrigerator, and his pride took a back seat to practicality. "Dad?" Max appeared in the doorway, hair sticking up in 12 directions, Superman pajamas wrinkled from sleep. "Why are you in the chair?" "Couldn't sleep," Daniel said, quickly pocketing the money and the note. "Wanted to watch the sunrise." Max patted over and climbed into his lap, something he was almost getting too big for, but Daniel would never discourage. "Did you see any good stars last night?" "A few," Daniel said, thinking of green eyes and emerald silk. "But nothing as bright as you, kiddo." Max groaned at the dad joke, but snuggled closer. "Can we have pancakes?" "Sure. Let me get breakfast started, and you get ready for school." As Max scampered off to brush his teeth, Daniel looked at the couch again, wondering if he'd ever see Miss Mercer again, wondering if she was okay, if she'd made it home safely. He had no idea that in exactly 7 days, she'd be standing in his doorway with a proposition that would change everything. The week that followed was typical in its struggles. Daniel drove nights, helped Max with homework, attended a parent-teacher conference where Max's teacher gently suggested he should be in the gifted program, if only Daniel could afford the additional fees. The $500 from Ms. Mercer went toward the electric bill and part of the rent, buying them another month of stability. He'd almost forgotten about that strange night until Thursday evening, when he was preparing dinner and heard a knock at the door. Not a casual knock, but 3 precise raps that somehow conveyed both authority and hesitation. Max was at Mrs. Chen's for another hour. Daniel wiped his hands on a dish towel and opened the door. Miss Mercer stood in his hallway, but she looked nothing like the broken woman he'd helped 6 nights ago. This version was put together, polished, powerful. She wore a charcoal business suit that probably cost more than his car, her hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. The only thing that seemed the same were her eyes, that striking green, now clear and focused and desperate in a different way. "Mr. Hayes," she said, and he was surprised she knew his name. "We need to talk." "How did you find you?" "Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Lovely woman. Very protective of you, by the way. It took some convincing to get your name, and even more to get her to tell me when you'd be home alone." She paused, seeming to gather herself. "May I come in?" Daniel stepped aside, his mind racing. Why was she here? Had she left something? Was she upset about that night? She entered his apartment with the same assessing look she'd given him that night, taking in the modest furniture, the wall of Max's achievements, the general atmosphere of trying hard but barely making it. "Can I get you something to drink?" Daniel offered, falling back on basic hospitality. "Coffee? Water?" "Water would be fine," she said, settling onto the same couch where she'd slept 6 nights ago. Daniel filled a glass, the same glass he realized with a start, and handed it to her. She took a sip, and he noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Mr. Hayes—" "Daniel Sutz," he corrected. "If you're going to show up at my apartment, we might as well use first names." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Daniel, I'm Olivia Mercer." The name finally clicked. "Mercer Hotels. You're that Olivia Mercer, the one who was in Forbes last month." She nodded. "Among other publications. Though after this week I might be in them for very different reasons." Daniel sat in his armchair, the same one he'd slept in that night. "What happened? If you don't mind me asking." Olivia took another sip of water, clearly stalling. "Have you ever built something from nothing? Spent 15 years of your life creating something meaningful, only to have someone threaten to take it all away because you don't fit their narrow definition of stability?" "I can't say I have," Daniel admitted, "but I know what it's like to lose everything that matters." She looked at him sharply, and he saw her notice the photographs on the mantel. Him, Max, and Sarah at Navy Pier, Sarah's last good day before the cancer took over completely. "Your wife," she said. It wasn't a question. 2 years ago, cancer. "I'm sorry." "Thanks." Daniel leaned forward. "But you didn't come here to talk about my dead wife." "What's going on, Olivia?" She set down the glass and clasped her hands together, knuckles white with tension. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear me out completely before you say no." "Okay." "My company is facing a hostile takeover. The Bradley I mentioned that night, Bradley Morrison, he was my CFO. Was, until he decided to orchestrate a coup with our European investors. They claim I'm too much of a risk to lead the company. Unmarried, no children, too focused on work. They want someone with family values running Mercer Hotels." Daniel frowned. "That's bullshit, and probably illegal. It's dressed up in nicer language, of course. They talk about stability, long-term vision, someone who understands the family market. But what they mean is they want a man, or at least a woman who fits their June Cleaver fantasy. So sue them. With what money? They've frozen my assets pending a board review. I have 7 days to present a stability plan that satisfies their concerns, or they vote me out of my own company." She took a breath. "Which brings me to why I'm here." Daniel felt a strange tingling in his spine, like standing too close to the edge of a cliff. "Olivia, I need a husband," she said quickly, like ripping off a Band-Aid. "Within the week. Someone respectable, responsible, someone who makes me look stable and family-oriented, someone they can't find dirt on or pay off." Daniel stood up so fast the chair rocked. "You're asking me to marry you? Are you insane?" "Quite possibly," she admitted. But I'm also desperate. Daniel, you saved me that night, not just from freezing to death, but from making what would have been a very public mistake. I was going to go back in there, to that party, and tell them all exactly what I thought of them. It would have been career suicide. So you think you owe me something? The 500 covered any debt. This isn't about debt, Olivia interrupted. This is about mutual benefit. I've done my research on you, Daniel Hayes. Single father, widower, working 3 jobs to keep your son in school. Your son, Max, tested in the 99th percentile on his cognitive assessments. He should be in advanced programs, getting the education his mind needs. But you can't afford it. Daniel's hands clenched. Don't bring my son into this. I'm bringing reality into this, Olivia said firmly. You're drowning, Daniel. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. 1 missed payment, 1 sick day, 1 car repair, and your whole house of cards collapses. I'm offering you a life raft. In exchange for what? Pretending to love you? In exchange for a business arrangement. 1 year of marriage. You help me save my company. I ensure Max gets the best education money can buy. Private school, tutors, college fund, everything. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think you can just buy a family? I think I can make a mutually beneficial arrangement that helps us both. She stood, pulling a folder from her bag. This is a contract. Everything spelled out clearly. Responsibilities, expectations, compensation. It's more than fair. Compensation, Daniel repeated. You want to pay me to be your husband. I want to ensure you're taken care of for the inconvenience. Inconvenience? Lady, you're talking about marriage, sacred vows. Till death do us part. Olivia's expression hardened. I'm talking about survival. Mine and, whether you want to admit it or not, yours too. She set the folder on his coffee table. Read it. Think about it. But I need an answer by tomorrow night. The board meeting is Monday. She headed for the door, then paused. That night, when you found me, I was at my lowest point. You didn't judge, you didn't take advantage, you just helped. That's why I'm asking you, Daniel, because I think you're one of the few genuinely good people left in this world, and good people deserve good things to happen to them. After she left, Daniel stood in his tiny kitchen, staring at the folder like it might bite him. Part of him wanted to throw it away without looking, to pretend this insane conversation had never happened. But the other part, the part that had spent 2 hours last night calculating whether he could afford to fix the car's heating system, made him open it. The contract was thorough, frighteningly thorough. It covered everything from living arrangements, separate bedrooms, to public appearances, minimum of 2 per month, to what would happen if either party wanted out early, significant financial penalties for her, none for him. The compensation section made his eyes water. Not just Max's education, but health insurance, life insurance, a salary that was more than he made in a year driving rideshare. All legal, all above board, all designed to look like a legitimate marriage to the outside world while being a business arrangement in private. Dad. Daniel jumped. Max stood in the doorway, backpack still on, looking curious. Hey, buddy. How was Mrs. Chen's? Good. We made dumplings. Max came closer, eyeing the folder. What's that? Just some paperwork, Daniel said, closing it quickly. Grown-up stuff. Boring. Max didn't look convinced, but he let it go. Can we look at the stars tonight? Mr. Peterson said the International Space Station will be visible at 8:47. Sure thing, Daniel promised, ruffling his son's hair. Homework first, though. As Max settled at the kitchen table with his assignments, Daniel watched him work, pencil flying across the page, that brilliant mind tackling problems that would have stumped kids twice his age. He thought about the gifted program Max couldn't attend, the science camps he couldn't afford, the opportunities slipping away day by day. He thought about Sarah, what she would want for their son. She'd been the practical one, the planner. Promise me, she'd said near the end, when the morphine made her loopy, but somehow clearer too. Promise me you'll do whatever it takes to give Max the life he deserves. I promise, he'd said, holding her hand while she slipped away. Whatever it takes. Daniel looked at the folder again, then at his son, then at the bills stuck to his refrigerator with magnets shaped like planets. Sometimes life didn't give you good choices, just necessary ones. But this? This felt like standing at the edge of that cliff, knowing he was about to jump, knowing he had no idea if there was water or rocks below. He had until tomorrow night to decide. Outside, Chicago rumbled on, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in tiny apartments, to the desperate decisions being made by desperate people. The sun set behind the skyline, turning the windows of distant skyscrapers to gold, and Daniel wondered what Olivia Mercer was doing right now, if she was as scared as he was, if she knew what she was really asking. A marriage built on necessity instead of love, a year of pretending, a chance for Max to have everything Daniel couldn't give him. Sarah had asked him to do whatever it takes, but she'd probably never imagined something like this. The next morning came too quickly, and with it, a decision that felt impossible to make. Daniel had barely slept, spending most of the night staring at the contract, reading and rereading each clause while Max slept peacefully in the next room. By the time his alarm went off at 6:30, he'd memorized every word, every provision, every carefully crafted sentence that would bind him to Olivia Mercer for the next year. Max bounded into the kitchen as Daniel was making breakfast, full of his usual morning energy. "Dad, did you see the space station last night? It was so bright." "I saw it, buddy," Daniel lied. He'd been too distracted to even look out the window at 8:47, too consumed with the weight of Olivia's proposition. "Mrs. Rodriguez says if I keep my grades up, I might be able to apply for the summer science program at the Museum of Science and Industry," Max continued, pouring cereal with the concentration of someone performing surgery. "But she said it's really expensive. Like, really, really expensive." Daniel's hand paused over the coffee maker. Even the universe seemed to be pushing him toward this insane decision. "We'll figure it out," he said. The same promise he'd been making for 2 years, the one that got harder to keep every time. After dropping Max at school, Daniel sat in his car in the parking lot, phone in hand. He'd found Olivia's business card tucked into the contract folder. Elegant black cardstock with silver embossing, just her name and a phone number. No title, because when you were Olivia Mercer, you didn't need one. He dialed before he could lose his nerve. "Daniel," she answered on the second ring, and he wondered if she'd been waiting by the phone. "Have you made a decision?" "I have questions first." "I'm listening." "Max can never know this is fake. If we do this, he has to believe it's real. I won't lie to my son, but I also won't have him thinking he's part of some business transaction." "Agreed," Olivia said immediately. "I would never want to confuse or hurt a child. Second, you need to understand that he comes first. Always. Every decision, every schedule, every plan, Max is my priority." "Of course. I wouldn't expect anything less from a good father." Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Third, what happens after? When the year is up, you can't just disappear from his life. Kids get attached." There was a pause on the other end. "I'll ensure there's a transition plan, something that makes sense and doesn't traumatize him." "And fourth," Daniel said, "I need to know why me." Really why? Chicago's full of out-of-work actors who jump at this chance. Why choose a rideshare driver with baggage? Olivia was quiet for so long he thought she might have hung up. Then, softly, she said, "Because you didn't have to help me that night. Because you gave me your dead wife's socks to keep my feet warm. Because when you had an unconscious billionaire in your apartment, instead of taking pictures or calling the press or doing any number of things that could have benefited you, you just let me sleep it off and left me water and aspirin." She paused, then continued. "And because when I researched you, I found out that you've been driving Mrs. Chen to her dialysis appointments for free for the past 6 months, that you volunteer at Max's school even though you barely have time to sleep, that your former employer called you the most honest man I've ever met in a reference letter." "You saw my reference letters." "I'm very thorough, Daniel. I had to be sure you were who I thought you were." Her voice grew firmer, more businesslike. "So yes, I could hire an actor. But I need someone the board will believe, someone who won't crack under pressure, someone who has as much to lose as I do if this goes wrong. I need you." Daniel closed his eyes, seeing Max's face when he talked about the science program, seeing the bills piling up, seeing Sarah in her hospital bed making him promise. "Okay," he said, the word falling out before he could stop it. Okay, I'll do it. Really? The relief in Olivia's voice was palpable. On one condition beyond what's in the contract. Name it. We do this right. If we're going to pretend to be married, we need to make it believable. That means you need to know about Max's favorite dinosaur and his peanut allergy, and the fact that he still sleeps with the stuffed elephant his mom gave him. And I need to know about you, your favorite coffee, your childhood, what makes you laugh. The board's going to look for cracks, right? So we can't have any. You're right, Olivia agreed. When can we start? Daniel looked at his watch. It was 9 a.m. on Friday. The board meeting was Monday. Max has a sleepover at his friend Tommy's house tonight. Can you come by around 7? We can go over everything, practice our story. I'll bring dinner, Olivia said. And Daniel? Thank you. You don't know what this means. But he thought maybe he did. Desperation recognized desperation, after all. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Daniel went through the motions. Grocery shopping, laundry, cleaning the apartment. But his mind was elsewhere, trying to process what he'd just agreed to. He was going to marry Olivia Mercer. In less than 72 hours, he was going to stand in front of someone and pledge his life to a woman he'd known for exactly 1 week. Sarah would either laugh or cry. Maybe both. When he picked Max up from school, his son was buzzing with excitement about the sleepover. Tommy's mom said we could make pizza and watch movies and stay up until 10. 10, Dad? That's so late. Daniel smiled, remembering when 10 o'clock had seemed impossibly late to him, too. That sounds amazing, buddy. You got your overnight bag packed? Yeah, I put in extra underwear like you always say, and my toothbrush, and Mr. Elephant, but I hid him in the bottom so Tommy won't see. Smart thinking. After dropping Max off with multiple hugs and promises to pick him up in the morning, Daniel returned to his apartment to find Olivia already there, standing in the hallway with 2 large bags of what smelled like Chinese food. The door was propped open downstairs, she explained. Someone moving out, I think. She looked different than she had yesterday. Still polished, but softer somehow. She'd traded the power suit for dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, her hair down in soft waves. She looked almost normal, if normal people wore jeans that probably cost $500. Come in, Daniel said, taking one of the bags. Smells amazing. Sichuan Palace, she said. Best Chinese in Chicago, in my opinion. They unpacked the food in his tiny kitchen, enough to feed a small army. Kung Pao chicken, beef, and broccoli, spring rolls, fried rice, lo mein, and half a dozen other containers. I didn't know what you liked, Olivia admitted, seeming almost embarrassed by the excess. I like food, Daniel said, grabbing plates. This is perfect. They sat at his small dining table, the same one where Max did his homework, and for a moment neither spoke. The awkwardness was palpable, 2 strangers about to embark on the most intimate of charades. So, Daniel finally said, serving himself some rice, tell me about Olivia Mercer. The real one, not the Forbes version. Olivia picked up a spring roll, considering. What do you want to know? Everything. Start from the beginning. Where did you grow up? Boston, Beacon Hill. My parents were both lawyers, corporate law, the soul-sucking kind. They wanted me to follow in their footsteps, had my whole life mapped out. Phillips Exeter, then Harvard Law, then a position at their firm. But you didn't? She smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. I did, actually. Right through Harvard. But the summer before law school, I took a job at a small boutique hotel in Vermont, just to rebel a little, and I fell in love, not with a person, but with the industry. The way a good hotel could be a home away from home, a sanctuary, a place where memories were made. So you ditched law school? My parents were furious. They cut me off completely, said I was throwing my life away for a service job. She took a bite of chicken, chewing thoughtfully. I started at the bottom, front desk, housekeeping, anything to learn the business. Took me 5 years to save enough to buy my first property, a rundown motel in New Hampshire. Fixed it up myself, learned to do plumbing at 2 a.m. from YouTube videos. Daniel found himself genuinely interested. And now you have what, 50 hotels? 47, she corrected. Each one special in its own way. I know that sounds like corporate speak, but it's true. Every Mercer hotel is designed to reflect its community, to be part of the neighborhood rather than some generic chain. Is that why the board wants you out? Too much personality, not enough profit? Olivia's expression darkened. They want someone who'll franchise, who'll turn Mercer Hotels into another cookie-cutter brand that maximizes shareholder value. Bradley convinced them I'm too emotionally invested, too focused on unnecessary details like living wages for housekeeping staff and locally sourced restaurant ingredients. Sounds like Bradley's an ass. Bradley's a snake, Olivia said flatly. He smiled to my face for 3 years while planning this coup. The European investors were his ace in the hole. Conservative old money types who think a woman without a family can't possibly understand the hospitality industry, even though you built it from nothing. Especially because I built it from nothing. It threatens them, the idea that someone like me could succeed without their approval, without following their rules. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment, then Olivia turned the tables. Your turn. Tell me about Daniel Hayes. Daniel set down his fork. Not much to tell. Grew up here in Chicago, South Side. Parents were good people. Dad worked construction. Mom was a teacher. They died in a car accident when I was 22. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. I was lost for a while after that, bounced between jobs, couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. Then I met Sarah at a bookstore. She was reaching for the same copy of some obscure astronomy book. We both grabbed it at the same time, like something out of a romantic comedy. He smiled at the memory. She was brilliant, getting her PhD in astrophysics at University of Chicago. I was working at a coffee shop, feeling like an idiot next to her, but she never made me feel that way. She said I was the only person who could make her laugh when she was stressed about her dissertation. How long were you married? 6 years. We got married right after she defended her thesis. Small ceremony in her advisor's backyard. She wore her grandmother's dress and Converse sneakers because she said heels were a tool of the patriarchy. Olivia laughed, a genuine sound that filled the small space. We had Max a year later. He was planned. Sarah had everything planned. She wanted to have a baby while she was doing her postdoc so she could take advantage of the university's maternity leave. Even had his college fund started before he was born. Daniel's voice grew quieter. The cancer diagnosis came when Max was 5. Stage 3 ovarian. They said it was aggressive but treatable. Sarah fought it with everything she had. Chemo, radiation, clinical trials. She lasted 18 months, which the doctor said was a miracle. She sounds amazing. She was. And she'd probably think this whole situation was hilarious. She always said I was too noble for my own good, that sometimes you had to play dirty to get ahead. He looked at Olivia directly. So how do we do this? How do we convince your board that we're madly in love? Olivia pulled out an iPad. I've prepared a timeline. We need a believable story that can withstand scrutiny. For the next 2 hours, they crafted their fiction. They'd met 3 months ago when Daniel had been her rideshare driver, close enough to the truth. They'd started talking, discovered a connection, began meeting for coffee. Things had progressed quickly. When, you know, the recent engagement had been private, romantic, just the two of them, because that's what felt right. We'll need rings, Olivia said, making notes. I still have Sarah's, Daniel offered, then immediately felt weird about it. I mean, not to wear, but we'll get new ones, Olivia said gently. This is complicated enough without bringing your late wife's ring into it. They covered everything. How he'd proposed, quietly, at home, nothing flashy. Where they planned to live, her penthouse during the week. His apartment on weekends so Max could maintain stability. Future plans, taking it one day at a time, focused on Max's adjustment. We need photos, Olivia said suddenly. Couples have photos. We could take some now. She looked around his apartment, then at him. We look like we're having a business meeting. We need to look like we're in love. Daniel thought for a moment, then stood and went to his closet. He came back with a bottle of wine. A nice one, something Sarah's colleagues had given them that they'd been saving for a special occasion that never came. Liquid courage? He suggested. Olivia smiled. God, yes. 2 glasses of wine later, they were both more relaxed. Olivia had kicked off her designer boots and was sitting cross-legged on his couch, looking through Max's photo album and asking questions about each picture. He really loves space, doesn't he? She said, noting the consistent theme. Gets it from his mom. Sarah used to take him to the Adler Planetarium every weekend. He knows more about the solar system than most adults. I could get him an internship there, Olivia said thoughtfully. I know the director. You can't buy his affection, Daniel warned. I'm not trying to. I want him to like me. Is that stupid? Daniel looked at her, really looked at her. In the soft light of his living room, slightly buzzed from wine, she looked vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with business deals or hostile takeovers. It's not stupid. But Max doesn't care about internships or connections. He cares about people who listen when he talks about black holes, who don't get impatient when he explains something for the 10th time, who remember that he hates tomatoes but loves tomato sauce. Noted, Olivia said seriously, like she was mentally filing it away. They took photos with Daniel's phone, selfies on the couch, Olivia laughing at something he said, him looking at her with what he hoped passed for adoration. After a few attempts, they started to look natural, comfortable even. We need a kissing photo, Olivia said, and the temperature in the room seemed to shift. Do we? Couples have kissing photos, Daniel. The board will expect to see evidence of physical affection. She was right, of course. But knowing that didn't make it less awkward when she leaned in, when he could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle, when her hand touched his cheek to angle his face toward the camera. Ready? She asked, and he nodded, not trusting his voice. The kiss was supposed to be quick, just for the photo, but her lips were softer than expected, and she made a small sound of surprise that made him deepen it instinctively, his hand coming up to tangle in her hair. For a moment, just a moment, it felt real. Then his phone clicked, the photo taken, and they pulled apart. That was... Olivia started, then stopped, her cheeks flushed. Yeah, Daniel agreed, not sure what he was agreeing to. They both looked at the phone. The photo was perfect, intimate, genuine, the kind of photo real couples had. No one would question it. We should practice, Olivia said suddenly. Physical affection, I mean. If we're awkward in public, people will notice. You're right, Daniel said, even though every part of him was screaming that this was a bad idea. We need to be comfortable with each other. So they practiced, holding hands while they cleaned up dinner, Olivia leaning against him while they watched TV, his arm around her shoulders. Small touches that couples did without thinking but felt monumental between two strangers playing pretend. By the time Olivia left at midnight, they'd established a routine, a rhythm that almost felt natural. Tomorrow, we get the rings, she said at the door. And Sunday, we get married. Sunday? Daniel nearly choked. The board meeting is Monday. When else would we do it? We need the marriage certificate to be real. She was right. Of course she was right. But Sunday was in 36 hours. City Hall is closed on Sundays, he pointed out. I have a judge who owes me a favor. He'll do it privately, make it official. You have judges who owe you favors? I have a lot of people who owe me favors, Daniel. That's how I built my empire. She paused, looking up at him. Are you sure about this? Once we sign those papers, there's no going back. At least not for a year. Daniel thought about Max, about promises made to dying wives, about the stack of bills that never seemed to get smaller, no matter how many hours he worked. I'm sure, he lied. Olivia nodded, then surprised him by rising up on her toes and kissing his cheek. Thank you, she whispered. I know this is insane. I know I'm asking too much. But thank you. After she left, Daniel stood in his apartment that still smelled like Chinese food and expensive perfume, wondering what Sarah would say if she could see him now. He touched his cheek where Olivia had kissed it, then his lips where they'd kissed for the photo, and tried not to think about how long it had been since someone had touched him with anything approaching tenderness. Saturday morning came with Max calling at 7 a.m., begging to stay at Tommy's for a few more hours. They were building a fort, apparently, and it wasn't done yet. Daniel agreed, grateful for the extra time to process everything. Olivia picked him up at noon in a car that cost more than most people's houses, a black Mercedes that purred like a well-fed cat. She was wearing sunglasses and had her hair pulled back, looking every inch the billionaire she was. Ready to go ring shopping? She asked, and the casualness of the question belied its weight. The jewelry store she took him to wasn't Tiffany or Cartier. It was a small, discreet place in Lincoln Park that apparently specialized in custom pieces for people who didn't want their purchases ending up in society columns. Miss Mercer, the owner, an elderly man with knowing eyes, greeted them. I have several selections based on your specifications. He led them to a private room where velvet boxes waited like expensive promises. The rings were all elegant but understated, nothing that would scream fake marriage, but nothing that would overshadow the story they were telling either. This one, Olivia said, pointing to a simple platinum band with a single diamond surrounded by smaller ones. It looks like something you'd choose, classic, meaningful, not trying too hard. She was right. It was exactly the kind of ring Daniel would have chosen if this were real. Similar to Sarah's in its simplicity, but different enough that it wouldn't feel like a betrayal. His ring was a plain platinum band, heavy and solid. When he slipped it on to check the size, it felt strange, foreign. He hadn't worn a ring in 2 years, had taken his off the day after Sarah's funeral when the weight of it felt like it might pull him under. How do they feel? The jeweler asked. Like they belong, Olivia lied smoothly, and Daniel nodded in agreement. They left with the rings in their boxes, marriage scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, and Daniel felt like he was in free fall, except instead of falling down, he was falling forward, into a future he couldn't quite see. I need to tell Max something, he said as Olivia drove him home. About us. He can't just come home to a stepmother with no warning. What will you say? The truth, mostly. That we met, that we care about each other, that things move fast, but sometimes that happens. He's 8, not stupid. He'll have questions. Do you want me there when you tell him? Daniel considered this. No, I think it needs to be just us first. But maybe you could come for dinner tomorrow, after the ceremony. We could all eat together, start building something that feels normal. I'd like that, Olivia said, and she sounded like she meant it. When Daniel picked Max up from Tommy's, his son was exhausted but happy, covered in blanket fort dust and the remains of what looked like an epic pancake breakfast. Did you have fun? Daniel asked as they drove home. The best! Tommy's dad made pancakes that looked like Death Stars, and his mom let us stay up until almost 11 watching movies. 11? That's practically morning. I know. Max yawned hugely. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Are you lonely? Because Mrs. Chen says you're lonely, and that's why you work so much. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Why would Mrs. Chen say that? I heard her talking to Mr. Rodriguez. She said you need to find someone, like how Tommy's dad found Tommy's stepmom after his first mom left. This was it. The opening he needed, delivered by his well-meaning neighbor via his 8-year-old son. Actually, buddy, there's something I want to talk to you about. Someone I want you to meet. Max sat up straighter. Are you dating someone? I am. Her name is Olivia, and she's become very important to me. How come I haven't met her? Because I wanted to be sure first. Sure that she was someone special, someone who would be good for both of us. Max was quiet for a long moment. Then, is she pretty? Daniel laughed despite himself. Yes, she's pretty. Is she nice? Very nice and smart. She runs hotels, lots of them. Does she like space? I think she'd love to learn about space from you. Max considered this. Is she going to be my new mom? The question hit Daniel like a physical blow. No one could ever replace your mom, Max. No one. But Olivia could be a bonus person. Someone else who cares about you, who wants good things for you. Like Tommy's stepmom? Kind of like that, yeah. Will she live with us? Some of the time. We're still figuring it all out, but Max, buddy, I need you to know that you're still my #1 priority. Nothing about that changes. If you're not comfortable with this, we'll figure something else out. Max was quiet for so long that Daniel started to worry. Then, in a small voice, his son asked, Do you love her? Daniel thought about lying, about saying yes unequivocally, but this was his son, the person he'd never lied to about anything important. I care about her, he said carefully, and sometimes, when grown-ups have been hurt, caring is how love starts. Does that make sense? Like how I didn't like Tommy at first, but now he's my best friend? Something like that. Okay, Max said simply. Can we have pizza for dinner? And just like that, Daniel's 8-year-old had accepted what was about to happen with more grace than Daniel himself had managed. That evening, while Max was absorbed in a documentary about Mars, Daniel texted Olivia about the conversation. She responded immediately. He sounds amazing. I'm terrified of meeting him tomorrow. Don't be. Just be yourself. Myself is a workaholic with no experience with children. Then be that. He appreciates honesty more than false enthusiasm. There was a pause, then, what if he hates me? Daniel looked at his son, curled up on the couch with his stuffed elephant barely hidden under a throw pillow, completely absorbed in learning about Martian soil composition. He won't. Just remember the tomato thing. Sunday arrived gray and cold with the kind of wind that cut through even the warmest coat. Daniel dressed carefully in his only suit, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral, though he tried not to think about that. Max was at Mrs. Chen's for the afternoon, bribed with the promise of her homemade cookies and cartoons. Olivia picked him up at 2 o'clock, and she looked radiant wasn't the right word. She looked determined, like a general preparing for battle. She wore a cream-colored dress, simple but elegant, with her grandmother's pearl necklace, something old, she explained, trying to bring some tradition to their untraditional union. The judges' chambers were in a brownstone in Hyde Park, book-lined and smelling of leather and old paper. Judge Harrison was a distinguished black man in his 60s who greeted Olivia with genuine warmth. I never thought I'd see the day, he said, shaking Daniel's hand. Olivia Mercer, getting married. And in such a rush, too. When you know, Olivia said, threading her arm through Daniel's. The ceremony was brief, clinical almost. They stood before the judge's desk while he read the traditional vows, though nothing about this was traditional. Daniel's hands shook as he slipped the ring onto Olivia's finger. Hers were steadier, but he could feel her pulse racing when she held his hand. Do you, Daniel James Hayes, take Olivia Catherine Mercer to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Daniel said, the words scraping past the lump in his throat. Do you, Olivia Catherine Mercer, take Daniel James Hayes to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, she said, her voice strong and clear. By the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. This kiss was different from the practice one. This one was legal, binding, witnessed. Daniel cupped Olivia's face gently, feeling the weight of the moment, the magnitude of what they'd just done. Her lips trembled against his, and when they pulled apart, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Congratulations, Judge Harrison said, though his expression suggested he knew something was off about this union. I'll file the paperwork first thing tomorrow morning. It'll be official before your board meeting, Olivia. Outside, standing on the sidewalk in the gray Chicago afternoon, Daniel and Olivia looked at each other like survivors of a shipwreck, not quite sure how they'd ended up on this particular shore. We did it, she said, sounding dazed. We did. We're married. We are. They stood there for a moment, the reality settling over them like snow, quiet and inevitable. We should go get Max, Olivia said finally. Have that dinner. Are you ready for this? No, she admitted, but I don't think I ever would be. They drove to Daniel's apartment first to drop off his car, then to Mrs. Chen's to collect Max. Daniel's neighbor took one look at them standing together and raised an eyebrow that said she knew something was up, but wouldn't ask questions in front of the boy. Max, Daniel said, this is Olivia. Max looked up at her with those serious eyes that were so much like Sarah's, assessing. Olivia, to her credit, didn't try too hard. She simply offered her hand for a shake. Hi, Max. Your dad's told me a lot about you. I hear you're interested in astronomy. Astrophysics, actually, Max corrected. Astronomy is just looking at stars. Astrophysics is understanding them. My mistake, Olivia said seriously. I'd love to learn the difference if you're willing to teach me. Max considered this. Do you know what a black hole is? A region of space where gravity is so strong that nothing can escape? That's the simple version, Max said, but Daniel could see he was impressed. There's actually a lot more to it. Like, Did you know there's a supermassive black hole at the center of every galaxy? I didn't know that, Olivia said, and whether she did or didn't, she sounded genuinely interested. How massive is supermassive? And just like that, Max was off, explaining event horizons and singularities while they walked to the restaurant Olivia had chosen. A family place. Nothing fancy. The kind of spot where kids could be kids without anyone giving dirty looks. Dinner was surprisingly easy. Max dominated the conversation, testing Olivia with increasingly complex space facts, and she kept up admirably, asking questions that showed she was actually listening. When Max mentioned the summer science program at the museum, Olivia didn't offer to pay for it or mention her connection to the director. She just said it sounded amazing and asked what he hoped to learn there. "You're different than I thought you'd be," Max announced as they waited for dessert. "Different how?" Olivia asked. "Dad said you run hotels. I thought you'd be all fancy and boring, but you're only a little fancy." "Only a little?" Olivia laughed, and it was genuine, warm. "I'll take that as a compliment." "Are you going to marry my dad?" Daniel choked on his water. They hadn't discussed how to handle this, when to tell Max about the marriage that had already happened. Olivia looked at Daniel, then back at Max. "Would that be okay with you?" "If I did?" Max shrugged, but Daniel could see him thinking hard. "I guess. As long as things don't get weird." "Weird how?" "Like Tommy's house got weird when his stepmom moved in. Suddenly he had to eat vegetables at every meal and couldn't watch TV after 7. "I don't care about vegetables," Olivia said solemnly, "and I barely know how to operate a TV." "Really?" "Really. I mostly just work. Your dad's helping me learn how to do other things, fun things." "Like what?" "Well, tonight he's teaching me how to have dinner with the world's foremost 8-year-old astrophysicist." Max giggled, actually giggled, and Daniel felt something in his chest loosen just a fraction. After dinner, they went back to Daniel's apartment. Max showed Olivia his room, his telescope, his collection of NASA mission patches. She asked about each one, and when Max offered to let her look through the telescope at the moon, she accepted with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. "The moon's in its waxing gibbous phase," Max explained, adjusting the eyepiece for her. "See the dark parts? Those are called Maria, which means seas in Latin, but they're not really seas, they're volcanic plains." "It's beautiful," Olivia said softly, and when she pulled back from the telescope, Daniel saw wonder on her face. "I've never really looked at it before. Not like this." "Most people don't," Max said matter-of-factly. "They're too busy looking at their phones." By the time Olivia left, Max had extracted a promise that she'd come back Tuesday night for the lunar eclipse, and that she'd bring Chinese food from that place with the good spring rolls Dad always talks about but says is too expensive. "So?" Daniel asked after Max had gone to bed. They stood at his door, Olivia gathering her coat and purse. "So what?" "How do you think it went?" "I think your son is extraordinary," she said, "and I think I'm in way over my head. Join the club." She smiled, small and tired. "We're really doing this." "We really are. Tomorrow's the board meeting. You ready?" "I have to be." She touched the ring on her finger, twisting it nervously. "Daniel, what if they see through it? What if they know? Then we deal with it. Together. That's what married people do, right?" She looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her green eyes, then stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek, just like she had 2 nights ago. "Thank you," she whispered, and then she was gone, leaving Daniel standing in his doorway wearing a wedding ring that still felt foreign on his finger. Monday morning arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train. Daniel woke at 5 a.m., unable to sleep, his mind racing with everything that could go wrong. The board meeting was at 9 a.m. By lunch, they'd know if their hasty marriage had been convincing enough to save Olivia's company. He made Max breakfast, pancakes shaped like planets, or at least circular enough to pass for planets, and tried to act normal while his son chattered about the lunar eclipse and how Olivia had promised to bring her laptop so they could watch NASA's live feed while also observing through the telescope. "I like her," Max announced suddenly, syrup dripping from his fork. "She's weird, but good weird." "Weird how?" Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "She doesn't pretend to know stuff she doesn't know. Most adults do that. When I was explaining about tidal forces, she actually admitted she didn't understand and asked me to explain it again slower. Max paused, considering. And she smells nice. Like Mom's library. Daniel's heart clenched. Sarah's library, what they'd called her home office, had smelled of old books and vanilla candles. He hadn't noticed that about Olivia, but then again, 8-year-olds notice things adults missed. After dropping Max at school, Daniel drove downtown to the Mercer Hotel's headquarters. Olivia had asked him to be there, said the board would want to meet him, to verify their story. He'd worn his good suit again, had even gotten a haircut yesterday afternoon while Max was at Tommy's. Looking in the rearview mirror, he hardly recognized himself. He looked like someone who might actually belong in Olivia Mercer's world. The building was intimidating, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky. The lobby was marble and modern art, with a security desk that looked more like a command center. Daniel gave his name to the guard, who checked a list, made a call, then handed him a visitor badge with his photo already on it. They'd pulled it from somewhere, probably the background check Olivia had run. 32nd floor, Mr. Hayes, express elevator on your left. Miss Mercer is expecting you. The elevator ride made his ears pop. When the doors opened, he stepped into a world of hushed conversations and expensive suits. The reception area was all clean lines and fresh flowers, with a view of the city that made him dizzy. Mr. Hayes? A young woman appeared at his elbow, tablet in hand, wearing the kind of professionally pleasant expression that gave nothing away. I'm Jennifer, Ms. Mercer's assistant. She's in the boardroom, but she asked me to bring you to her office to wait. Olivia's office was exactly what he'd expected. Spacious, elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a desk that probably cost more than his annual income. What he hadn't expected were the personal touches. A photo of her parents, stiff-looking people in formal wear, a collection of small hotel figurines on a shelf, clearly collected over years, and surprisingly, already on her desk, the photo they'd taken Friday night, the two of them on his couch, looking like they were genuinely in love. She put that there this morning, Jennifer said, noticing his attention. First personal photo she's ever displayed. The board members definitely noticed. Before Daniel could respond, the door burst open and Olivia strode in, her face flushed with anger or adrenaline or both. 20-minute recess, she announced. Bradley's trying to paint me as emotionally unstable. He brought up the night you found me. She looked at Daniel, and he could see the panic beneath her composed exterior. Someone saw us. There's security footage of you helping me to your car. That's not necessarily bad, Daniel said, moving to her without thinking, his hands on her shoulders. We can use it. You were having a bad night. I helped you. It's how we met. It's romantic, not unstable. Jennifer cleared her throat. The board is asking to meet Mr. Hayes. Bradley's implying he's, not who you say he is. What's he saying? Olivia demanded. That Daniel's an opportunist. That you're paying him. He somehow found out about the $500 you left at his apartment. Olivia's hands clenched into fists. That son of a... Hey, Daniel interrupted. Let them meet me. I've got nothing to hide. Daniel, you don't understand. These people are sharks. They'll tear you apart looking for blood. I've faced worse, he said quietly, thinking of sitting in a hospital room hearing the word terminal, of explaining to a 6-year-old why Mommy wasn't coming home. Trust me. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Jennifer, tell them we'll be there in 5 minutes. After Jennifer left, Olivia turned to Daniel. Whatever happens in there, whatever they say, don't let them rattle you. Bradley will try to make you angry, to make you look unstable or unworthy. That's his strategy. Destroy my credibility by destroying yours. Olivia, Daniel said, catching her hand. She was shaking. We're married. For better or worse, remember? We face this together. She squeezed his hand, her wedding ring pressing against his. I don't deserve you. You deserve to keep the company you built. Now let's go convince some stuffed suits that we're madly in love. The boardroom was exactly as intimidating as Hollywood made such rooms appear. A massive oak table, leather chairs, portraits of stern-looking former executives watching from the walls. The board consisted of 7 people, 5 men and 2 women, all wearing expressions that ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. Bradley Morrison stood at the far end, a presentation remote in his hand, his smile sharp as a blade. He was younger than Daniel had expected, maybe 40, with the kind of aggressive handsomeness that probably worked well in business negotiations and singles bars. "Ah, the happy couple," Bradley said, his tone suggesting anything but happiness. "So good of you to join us, Mr. Hayes. We were just discussing your rather interesting background." "Nothing interesting about it," Daniel said evenly. "I'm a widower, a single father, and until recently a rideshare driver. Now I'm fortunate enough to be Olivia's husband." "Fortunate," Bradley repeated. "Interesting choice of words. Some might say suspiciously fortunate. Tell me, Mr. Hayes, how does a rideshare driver meet one of Chicago's most successful businesswomen?" "I picked her up as a passenger," Daniel said simply. "We talked. Connected. Sometimes life works that way." "And this connection happened when?" "Because according to our investigation, the first recorded interaction between you two was exactly 9 days ago, when security footage shows you helping an intoxicated Ms. Mercer into your vehicle." "That wasn't our first meeting," Olivia interjected. "That was simply the first time we were caught on camera together." "We'd been seeing each other privately for months before that." "Privately," Bradley said, loading the word with innuendo. "How convenient. No witnesses, no proof, just your word." An older man at the table, wearing a bow tie and wire-rimmed glasses, raised his hand slightly. "If I may, Bradley." "Mr. Hayes, you were married before?" "Yes, sir. My wife Sarah passed away 2 years ago from cancer." "And you have a son?" "Maximum. He's 8. The man, his nameplate read Harrison Whitfield III, studied Daniel carefully. "It seems rather quick, doesn't it? Meeting someone, marrying them, all while you have a young son to consider." "With respect, Mr. Whitfield, when you've lost someone you love, you learn that time isn't guaranteed. When I met Olivia, when I realized what we could have together, I didn't want to waste any more time. And as for Max, he was my first consideration. Olivia's been wonderful with him." "Has she now?" Bradley jumped in. "This woman who's never had children, who works 80-hour weeks, who's been photographed at charity events with a different date every time, suddenly she's playing mommy to your kid." Daniel felt his temper rise but kept his voice level. "She's not playing anything. She's building a relationship with my son, slowly and respectfully. And those dates you mentioned? I know about them. We've discussed her past, just like she knows about mine." "Including your financial past?" Bradley pulled up a slide on the screen behind him. Daniel's credit report, his bank statements, the mountain of medical debt. "Seems like marrying Ms. Mercer solved a lot of problems for you." "My late wife's medical bills aren't a secret," Daniel said. "And yes, Olivia's financial stability is welcome. But if you think I married her for money, you don't know either of us." "Then help us know you," one of the women said, Constance Fairfield, according to her nameplate. "Tell us about your relationship. Convince us this isn't what it looks like." Daniel looked at Olivia, who nodded slightly. He took a breath, then spoke from his heart. "I met Olivia 3 months ago when she requested a ride from the Palmer house to her office. It was raining, I remember, one of those October storms that makes the city feel like it's washing itself clean. She was on the phone when she got in, dealing with some crisis in Detroit. A hotel manager had quit without notice. But when she hung up, she apologized for being rude, for treating my car like an office. Most passengers don't do that. They treat drivers like furniture, like we're not even there." He saw Olivia's expression soften, even though this was partially fabricated. There was truth in it, too. "We started talking. She asked about the astronomy book on my dashboard, one of Max's that I'd been reading to understand what he was learning. She knew the author, had actually attended one of his lectures at Northwestern. We talked about space, about Chicago, about the challenge of raising kids in the city. She mentioned wanting children someday, wondering if she'd missed her chance by focusing on her career. The board was listening now, really listening. I started requesting longer routes when she was my passenger, going down Lakeshore Drive instead of taking the expressway, just to have more time to talk. She started requesting me specifically. Then one day she asked if I wanted to get coffee when I wasn't working. Said she wanted to continue a conversation we'd been having about whether Mars colonization was ethical." And you believed a woman of Ms. Mercer's stature wanted to have coffee with a rideshare driver, Bradley interrupted. I believed a lonely woman wanted to have coffee with someone who saw her as a person, not a bank account or a business opportunity, Daniel shot back. Someone who didn't want anything from her except her company. That night you helped her, Whitfield said. The security footage shows her in quite a state. How do you explain that? She'd had a terrible day. The Bradley situation, though she didn't name names then, had reached a breaking point. She'd discovered the depth of the betrayal, that someone she trusted was actively working against her. She'd had too much to drink at the corporate event, trying to maintain composure while her professional world crumbled. When I found her, she wasn't just drunk. She was heartbroken. Daniel looked directly at Bradley. She kept saying someone had taken her shoes. That seemed to hurt her more than anything, not the betrayal itself, but the petty cruelty of leaving her barefoot in February. It takes a special kind of bastard to do that to someone. Bradley's face reddened, and Daniel knew he'd hit the mark. I took her home, yes. Let her sleep it off on my couch while I slept in the chair. Made sure she was safe. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You take care of them at their lowest moments. Love, Constance repeated. You love her. Daniel thought about lying, about giving them the fairy tale they seemed to want. But then he looked at Olivia, really looked at her and spoke the truth. I'm learning to. My first wife and I fell in love like lightning. Instant, overwhelming, undeniable. With Olivia, it's different. It's choosing to open my heart again despite the fear. It's watching her with my son, seeing her genuinely try to understand his interests. It's the way she remembers that he likes his sandwiches cut diagonally, not straight. It's how she looks at the moon differently now because Max taught her about Maria and Highlands. He turned to face Olivia fully. It's knowing that she built an empire from nothing, not through ruthlessness, but through caring about every single employee, every single guest. It's seeing her vulnerability beneath the strength. It's recognizing someone else who's been broken but refuses to stay that way. The room was silent. Olivia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Pretty speech, Bradley said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. But speeches don't prove anything. Anyone can memorize lines. You want proof? Want proof? Olivia stood suddenly, her composure cracking. Fine. Daniel has a scar on his left shoulder from where Max accidentally hit him with a telescope when he was 5. He was so excited about seeing Saturn's rings, he swung it around without looking. He reads Max's astronomy textbooks cover to cover so he can keep up with his son's interests, even though half of it goes over his head. He keeps his wife's coffee mug on the kitchen shelf, even though he can't bear to use it. He makes $17 an hour driving rideshare, but donated $50 to the library's reading program because Max loves it there. She turned to Bradley. He hums when he cooks, usually off-key renditions of whatever Max has been listening to, currently the soundtrack from some video game about exploring space. He can't sleep on his left side because he broke those ribs in a car accident when he was 23. He writes notes for Max's lunch every single day, jokes that are so bad they're good, and Max saves every single one in a shoebox under his bed. Her voice grew stronger. He measures his coffee with an actual tablespoon because his wife taught him that precision matters in the small things. He has 17 astronomy apps on his phone, all downloaded to help Max with homework. When he's worried, he rubs his wedding ring. She paused, watching as Daniel unconsciously did exactly that, which he's doing right now. These aren't things you learn from a background check or a business arrangement. These are things you learn from paying attention to someone you care about, from early morning conversations and late night texts about everything and nothing, from building something real. Real, Bradley scoffed, but he was losing ground and everyone could feel it. You got married yesterday, in a judge's chambers, in secret. That doesn't exactly scream real love to me. We got married yesterday because we didn't want to wait, Olivia said. Because when you've both lost things, him, his wife, me, my faith in people I trusted, you learn that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. We got married in a judge's chambers because neither of us wanted a spectacle. We wanted something private, meaningful, ours. And quite conveniently timed for this board meeting, Bradley pointed out. You're right, Olivia said, surprising everyone. The timing is convenient. Because you forced my hand, Bradley. You and these investors who think a woman can't run a company without a man by her side. So yes, I moved up my timeline. Instead of waiting another few months like we'd planned, we got married now. Because I refused to lose my company to backward thinking and sexist assumptions. So you admit this marriage is about the company, Bradley said triumphantly. I admit that your attempted coup accelerated our plans, Olivia corrected. But this marriage is about Daniel and me choosing to build a life together. The company is just context. Whitfield cleared his throat. Mr. Hayes, you understand that if you're lying to us, if this is indeed a business arrangement, there could be legal consequences? Fraud charges? I understand that you're threatening me, Daniel said calmly. I understand that you're so convinced a woman like Olivia couldn't possibly choose someone like me that you'd rather believe in conspiracy than love, and I understand that nothing I say will convince you if you're determined not to believe. He stood, offering his hand to Olivia. But here's what I know. I know that in 6 days, this woman has brought more light into my son's life than I've seen in 2 years. I know that she's brilliant and driven and deserves to run this company without having to justify her personal life to anyone. And I know that whether you believe us or not, we're married, we're committed to making this work, and we're not going anywhere. Where are you going? Bradley demanded as they headed for the door. To pick up our son from school, Daniel said, the hour deliberate and pointed. He has a science presentation this afternoon, and we promised we'd be there. It was a lie. Max's presentation wasn't until Thursday, but the board didn't know that. What they saw was a couple prioritizing family over business, exactly the image Olivia needed to project. As they waited for the elevator, Olivia's hand found Daniel's, squeezing tight. Our son? She whispered. Too much? No. It was perfect. You were perfect. The elevator doors opened and they stepped inside. As soon as the doors closed, Olivia sagged against the wall. Do you think it worked? I think Bradley's an ass, but he's not stupid. He knows we rattled the board. The question is whether it was enough. Olivia's phone buzzed. She looked at it and her face went pale. They're calling a vote. In 1 hour. What does that mean? It means in 1 hour I either keep my company or lose everything. They went back to Olivia's office to wait. Jennifer brought coffee that neither of them drank. Daniel called Mrs. Chen to make sure she could pick Max up from school. Olivia paced, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor in a rhythm that matched Daniel's anxious heartbeat. Tell me something, Daniel said suddenly. Something that isn't in any report or background check, something true. Olivia stopped pacing. When I was 7, I wanted to be an astronaut. I had this whole plan. Air Force Academy, then NASA, then Mars. I was obsessed. Then my parents told me it was impractical, that law was a better choice for someone with my mind. I never looked at the stars again until Max showed me through his telescope. What made you really choose hotels over law? That summer in Vermont, there was this family. They'd saved for 3 years for a vacation, and everything went wrong. Their car broke down, the dad lost his job right before they left. The kids were disappointed, but the hotel staff, they made magic happen. Free upgrades, special treats, little surprises every day. By the end of their stay, that family was glowing with happiness. I realized then that hotels weren't just about rooms and amenities. They were about creating moments, providing sanctuary, making memories possible. She sat down beside him on the leather couch. What about you? What did you want to be before life happened? A teacher, Daniel admitted. Like my mom. I loved the idea of shaping minds, of being the person who made kids excited about learning. But then my parents died, and I needed money more than I needed dreams. Sarah used to say I should go back to school, get my degree. But then Max came, and then the cancer, and then, well, then it was too late. It's never too late, Olivia said softly. Says the woman who just told me she gave up on being an astronaut at 7. She laughed, a sad sound. Fair point. They sat in silence, watching the clock. 40 minutes, 30, 20. Whatever happens, Olivia said suddenly, I want you to know I don't regret this. The marriage, asking you, any of it. Even if I lose the company, at least I didn't lose it quietly. You're not going to lose, Daniel said with more confidence than he felt. How do you know? Because Max has already planned what he's going to show you at the eclipse tomorrow night. He made a chart and everything, and Max's plans have a way of working out. 10 minutes, 5. Jennifer knocked and entered, her face unreadable. The board is ready for you. They walked back to the boardroom hand in hand. The board was seated, their expressions giving nothing away. Bradley stood at the window, his back to them, shoulders tense. Whitfield stood, adjusting his bow tie. We've deliberated extensively about the situation at hand, about the leadership of this company, and what's best for its future. Daniel felt Olivia's hand tighten in his. While we have some concerns about the rapid nature of recent personal developments, Whitfield continued, we cannot ignore the fact that Ms. Mercer has successfully grown this company by 300% over the past 5 years. Her leadership, while unconventional, has been undeniably effective. Bradley turned from the window, his face a mask of controlled fury. Furthermore, Constance Fairfield added, Mr. Morrison's handling of the situation, the personal attacks, the questionable acquisition of private financial information, the attempt to weaponize Miss Mercer's personal life, shows a lack of judgment that concerns us greatly. The vote, Whitfield announced, was 5-2 in favor of maintaining current leadership. Ms. Mercer, you retain your position as CEO. Mr. Morrison, the board will be reviewing your position as CFO in a separate meeting this afternoon. Olivia's knees actually buckled. Daniel caught her, held her up, felt her whole body shaking with relief. Thank you, she managed. Thank you for your confidence. Don't thank us yet, Whitfield said sternly. We'll be watching closely. This marriage, this sudden stability, it had better be genuine, Ms. Mercer, for all our sakes. They left the building together, stepping out into the bright Chicago afternoon. The wind had died down, and the sun felt warm on Daniel's face. We did it, Olivia breathed. We actually did it. You did it, Daniel corrected. I just stood there and looked supportive. You did more than that. You were... God, Daniel, you were incredible. The things you said in there. Which parts were true? He asked, genuinely curious about her improvisation. All of it, she said quietly. Every single thing I said about you was true. I've been paying attention. They stood there on the sidewalk, business people flowing around them like water around stones, and Daniel realized that somewhere in the last week, the lines between fake and real had started to blur. We should celebrate, Olivia said. Dinner? My treat? Actually, Daniel checked his watch, we really do need to pick Max up. Not for a presentation, but it's Monday, which means astronomy club after school, and he hates when I'm late. We? You're invited. If you want. Fair warning, it's basically a dozen 8-year-olds arguing about whether Pluto should be a planet while eating too many fruit snacks. That sounds perfect, Olivia said, and she seemed to mean it. As they walked to Daniel's car, Olivia's phone rang. She looked at it, then declined the call. Bradley? Daniel asked. My father, she said, probably calling to tell me I'm making a mistake. Are you? She looked at him, this man who'd agreed to save her company, who'd stood up to a room full of sharks for her, who was now inviting her to his son's astronomy club like it was the most natural thing in the world. Probably, she said, but it's the best mistake I've ever made. The astronomy club was held in the basement of Max's school, which had been transformed into a makeshift planetarium with Christmas lights for stars and painted cardboard planets hanging from the ceiling. Max's face lit up when he saw them both walk in. Olivia! You came! Come see my Mars project! He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a table covered in red sand and carefully constructed mountains. Daniel watched as Olivia listened intently to Max's explanation of Olympus Mons, asking questions that made his son beam with pride. Mrs. Peterson, the club advisor, sidled up to Daniel. Is that your wife? Max mentioned you got married. The word wife still felt foreign, but Daniel nodded. That's Olivia. She seems wonderful with him. It's good to see Max happy. He's been so serious since, well, for a while now. Daniel watched as Max demonstrated something with a flashlight and a tennis ball, Olivia crouching down to his level to see better, her designer dress pooling on the dusty floor. She didn't seem to notice or care. "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "It is good." That evening, after Chinese food as promised and 2 hours of lunar eclipse observation, Max fell asleep on the couch between them, his head on Olivia's shoulder, his feet in Daniel's lap. They sat there in the darkness, afraid to move and wake him, the only light coming from the muted TV playing a nature documentary. "I should go," Olivia whispered eventually. "Let you get him to bed." "You could stay," Daniel offered, then quickly added, "on the couch. I mean, if you want. It's late, and you've got to be exhausted after today. I have a driver waiting downstairs." "Oh, right. Of course, but..." She didn't move, and neither did he. Max mumbled something about crater formations in his sleep, and they both smiled. "This is dangerous," Olivia said softly. "What is?" "This. Playing house, pretending to be a family. It would be easy to forget what this really is." "What is it really?" She looked at him across their sleeping almost sun, and in the blue light from the TV he could see the vulnerability she usually kept hidden. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "I thought I did, but now I don't know." Before Daniel could respond, her phone buzzed. She carefully extracted herself from under Max and checked it. "The European investors want to meet tomorrow, in Paris. I have to fly out tonight." "Tonight? But you just won. Can't you tell them to wait?" "That's not how it works. They own 30% of my company. If I don't go, they'll see it as weakness." She gathered her things quietly. "I'll be back Wednesday night. Thursday at the latest. Max will be disappointed. He wanted to show you his science presentation. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him..." She paused at the door, looking back at them. "Tell him I'll bring him something from Paris." "What do 8-year-olds like from Paris?" "He's not a typical 8-year-old. "No," she agreed. "He's extraordinary. Like his father." Then she was gone, leaving Daniel sitting in the dark with his son, wearing a wedding ring that was starting to feel less foreign, wondering how something that started as a lie could feel so much like coming home. Tuesday morning came with Max asking about Olivia before his eyes were fully open. Did she leave for her trip already? She didn't say goodbye. "She had to go late last night, buddy." Emergency meeting in Paris. "But she said to tell you she's sorry and she'll bring you something back." Max considered this while pouring cereal with mathematical precision. "Dad, do you think she actually likes us, or is she just pretending because she has to?" The question hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. "What makes you ask that?" "Tommy's stepmom pretended to like him at first. Then after the wedding, she changed. She doesn't come to his school stuff anymore." Max looked up with those two wise eyes. "I just don't want you to be sad again." Daniel pulled his son into a hug, breathing in the smell of his strawberry shampoo. "I think Olivia genuinely cares about us. But even if things change, we'll be okay. We're always okay, right?" "Right," Max agreed, but he didn't sound entirely convinced. The day felt off without Olivia's presence, which was strange considering Daniel had known her for barely a week. He found himself checking his phone constantly, but she didn't text or call. Radio silence from Paris. That evening, while helping Max with homework, Daniel's phone finally buzzed. Not a text, but an email with an attachment. The message was brief. "Thought Max might like this." Oh. The attachment was a photo from the Paris Observatory showing an antique telescope from the 1800s. The placard beside it was in French, but there was a handwritten translation in the margin of the photo. "This telescope was used to discover Neptune. Thought of our future astronomer." Max was delighted, immediately wanting to know everything about the telescope, about Neptune's discovery, about the Paris Observatory. They spent an hour researching together, and Daniel sent back a photo of Max surrounded by printouts and books, completely absorbed. The response came quickly this time. "That concentration face is exactly like yours when you were defending me to the board." "Genetic or learned?" Daniel smiled, typing back, "Both, probably." "How's Paris? Cold? Exhausting? Full of men who think I need their guidance." "I miss Chicago." She missed Chicago, not them specifically, but Daniel chose to read between the lines. "Chicago misses you too." 3 dots appeared showing she was typing, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, I have to go. Another dinner, another performance. Kiss Max goodnight for me. It was too intimate, that request, too real for what they were supposed to be. But when Daniel tucked Max in that night, he did kiss his forehead and whispered, "That's from Olivia." Max smiled sleepily. She doesn't have to be in Paris to kiss me goodnight. That's silly. But he fell asleep smiling, and Daniel stood in his doorway wondering when exactly this had all become so complicated. Wednesday was worse. No word from Olivia at all, and Max's science presentation loomed tomorrow. Daniel had taken an extra shift to cover the bills that Olivia's money hadn't reached yet, and he was exhausted by the time he picked Max up from school. "Is Olivia coming back for my presentation?" Max asked as they walked home. "I don't know, buddy." "She's trying, but these business things can be complicated." "Mom would have come," Max said quietly, and Daniel's heart shattered a little more. "Mom would have moved heaven and earth to be there," Daniel agreed. "But Olivia isn't Mom, Max. She's trying her best, but she has different responsibilities." "I know," Max said, but his disappointment was palpable. That night, after Max was asleep, Daniel sat in his kitchen staring at his phone, debating. Finally, he typed out a message. "Max's presentation is at 2 p.m. tomorrow. I know you're busy, but if there's any way—" He deleted it without sending. She knew when the presentation was. If she could make it, she would. If she couldn't, pressuring her wouldn't help. Thursday arrived gray and drizzly, matching Daniel's mood. He dressed carefully, his good suit again, because parents were invited to the presentation and he wanted Max to be proud. Mrs. Chen agreed to cover the rideshare hours he'd miss. "Your wife's still traveling?" she asked, and the casual way she said "wife" made Daniel's chest tight. "Yeah, Paris, business stuff." Mrs. Chen made a sound that could have meant anything. "My husband traveled for business. Missed a lot of things. But he always tried to make up for it." She patted Daniel's arm. "She seems like she tries." At 1:45, Daniel was in the school auditorium, saving 2 seats out of habit more than hope. Other parents filed in, chatting about work and weekend plans, normal family things. Daniel felt like an imposter among them, with his fake marriage and his borrowed stability. Max was backstage with the other presenters, probably reviewing his note cards for the 100th time. He'd chosen to present on black holes, specifically the event horizon and what happened when matter crossed it. Daniel had helped him practice until they both had it memorized. At 1:55, Daniel resigned himself to Olivia's absence. Paris to Chicago was an 8-hour flight, plus customs, plus traffic. Even if she'd left yesterday, the timing would be tight. At 1:59, just as Mrs. Peterson was approaching the microphone to begin, the auditorium door opened. Olivia slipped in, looking haggard but determined. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair pulled into a messy bun, and she was wearing, Daniel blinked, mismatched shoes. She spotted him immediately, making her way down the aisle with whispered apologies to the people she passed. When she dropped into the seat beside him, he could smell airplane and coffee and that expensive perfume she wore. "You made it," he whispered. "Flight landed an hour ago. I came straight here." She was breathing hard, like she'd run from the parking lot. "Did I miss him?" "He's third." "Oh, thank God, I was terrified She stopped, looking down at her feet. "Oh my God, my shoes." One was black, one was navy blue, both expensive, but definitely not a matched set. "I changed on the plane," she explained. "It was dark, I was exhausted. I grabbed the wrong—" She started to laugh, covering her mouth to keep quiet. "I'm a mess." "You're here," Daniel said. "That's all that matters." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "I almost didn't come. Told myself it was just a kid's science presentation, that my presence wouldn't matter. But then I kept thinking about his face when he showed me that Mars project, how proud he was, how he wanted me to see it, and I realized I wanted to be here. Not because I had to, not for appearances, but because Max worked hard on this, and I wanted to support him." Before Daniel could respond, Mrs. Peterson began introducing the presentations. The first student talked about volcanoes, the second about rainbows. Then it was Max's turn. He walked onto the stage in his best shirt, the one he saved for special occasions, carrying his poster board carefully. His eyes scanned the audience, found Daniel, then widened when he saw Olivia beside him. His whole face transformed, lighting up with joy and surprise. "My presentation is about black holes," he began, his voice clear and confident. "Specifically, what happens at the event horizon, which is the point of no return." For the next 7 minutes, Max explained complex physics with the clarity of someone who truly understood it, not just memorized it. He used analogies that made sense, visual aids he'd created himself. And when he talked about spaghettification, the stretching of matter as it approached the singularity, he even got a few laughs from the audience. In conclusion, Max said, black holes aren't just cosmic vacuum cleaners like people think. They're laboratories of extreme physics, places where our understanding of the universe breaks down. They're mysteries waiting to be solved, and maybe one day, when I'm an astrophysicist like my mom was, I'll help solve them. The applause was enthusiastic. Daniel saw tears on Olivia's cheeks, which she quickly wiped away. "Like his mom was," she whispered. "He's going to be just like her." "No," Daniel corrected softly. "He's going to be himself, which is even better." After all the presentations, there was a reception with cookies and juice in the cafeteria. Max bounded over to them, poster board under his arm, face flushed with excitement. "You came!" He threw his arms around Olivia without hesitation, and Daniel saw her freeze for a moment before carefully returning the hug. "Of course I came. I wouldn't miss this. You were incredible up there. Did you really fly all the way from Paris?" "Landed an hour ago," she confirmed. "And look," she reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I found this at a shop near the observatory." Max unwrapped it carefully, revealing a detailed model of the solar system, with planets that could be arranged and rearranged on wire arms around a central sun. "The shopkeeper said it's to scale," Olivia explained. "The distances aren't, obviously, or Neptune would be in the parking lot, but the planet sizes are accurate." "This is perfect," Max breathed. "Look, Dad, you can even see Jupiter's great red spot." As Max examined his gift, pointing out details to anyone who would listen, other parents approached to congratulate him. Several mothers gave Olivia curious looks. News of Daniel's sudden marriage had clearly made the rounds. "You must be the new Mrs. Hayes," one of them said, extending a manicured hand. "We heard Daniel had remarried." So quickly, too. There was judgment in her tone, thinly veiled disapproval. Olivia straightened, and Daniel saw the CEO emerge, the woman who'd faced down boardrooms full of hostile investors. "Yes, it was quick," Olivia agreed pleasantly. "When you know, you know." "Besides, at our age, why waste time? Life's too short to wait for the approval of people who don't matter." The woman retreated, properly chastened, and Daniel had to hide his smile. "That was mean," he murmured. "That was necessary," Olivia corrected. "They've been circling you like vultures, haven't they? The single moms wondering if the grieving widower is ready to date." "How did you—" "I saw 3 of them checking your ring finger when we walked in." She paused. "Was I wrong? Should I have been nicer?" "No," Daniel admitted. "You were perfect." They stayed for the entire reception, Olivia asking other kids about their projects with genuine interest, charming the teachers, playing the role of stepmother so naturally that Daniel almost forgot it was an act. When she laughed at something Max said, when she automatically fixed his collar that had gotten flipped up, when she remembered that he didn't like orange juice and steered him toward apple instead. These weren't performative gestures. They were real, unconscious, caring. As they were leaving, Max walking between them carrying his poster and his planet model, Mrs. Peterson pulled Daniel aside. "She seems wonderful," the teacher said. "Max has been talking about her all week. It's good to see him excited about something besides school." "She's been good for both of us," Daniel said, surprising himself with the honesty of it. In the parking lot, Olivia swayed slightly, exhaustion finally catching up. Daniel caught her elbow, steadying her. "When's the last time you slept?" "What day is it?" "Thursday." "Then Tuesday? Maybe?" The flights blend together. "You're not driving anywhere," Daniel said firmly. "Come on, I'll take you home." "My car." "We'll be fine here overnight." Max, hop in the back. Olivia didn't protest further, which told him how tired she really was. She fell asleep almost immediately, her head against the window, looking younger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Is she okay? Max asked quietly. Just tired. She flew all night to make it to your presentation. Really? Really? Max was quiet for a moment. That's what Mom would have done. Yeah, Daniel agreed. It is. He drove to Olivia's penthouse, which he'd never actually seen. The building was intimidatingly luxurious, all marble and doormen, and probably a dozen security cameras. The doorman clearly recognized Olivia, but gave Daniel a suspicious look. It's fine, George, Olivia mumbled, half awake. This is my husband. George's eyebrows shot up, but he said nothing, just opened the door for them. The private elevator to the penthouse required a special key, which Olivia fumbled with before Daniel took it from her and figured it out. Max was uncharacteristically quiet, taking in the opulence with wide eyes. The penthouse itself was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the entire city, modern furniture that looked more like art than something you'd sit on, and a strange emptiness, like a museum after hours. Guest room's second door on the right, Olivia mumbled, already heading toward what must be her bedroom. Make yourselves at home. She disappeared down the hallway, and Daniel heard a door close. Dad, Max whispered, this place is huge. Yeah, it is. Where are her pictures? Her stuff? Daniel looked around and realized Max was right. There were no personal touches, no photos, no clutter that indicated someone actually lived here. It was beautiful but cold, like a high-end hotel suite. Maybe she keeps them in her room, Daniel suggested. But he was thinking about his own apartment, every surface covered with evidence of their life. Max's drawings, Sarah's photos, the detritus of actual living. They found the kitchen, pristine and clearly rarely used, and Daniel managed to make sandwiches from the meager supplies in the refrigerator. Max sat at the massive marble island, still taking it all in. Is this where we're going to live? He asked. Sometimes, Daniel said carefully. We haven't worked out all the details yet. I like our apartment better. It feels more real. Me too, buddy. After they ate, Daniel found blankets in a closet that seemed dedicated entirely to linens and made up the couch for them to watch TV. The remote control had more buttons than the space station, but they eventually figured out how to find Max's favorite science channel. Around 7, Olivia emerged, wearing pajamas that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent, but looking more human than she had in days. You're still here, she said, seeming surprised. You could barely walk, Daniel pointed out. I wasn't going to leave you alone after a transatlantic flight on no sleep. She curled up in an oversized chair, tucking her feet under her. I missed dinner, didn't I? We made sandwiches. There's one for you in the fridge. You made me a sandwich? She seemed touched by this simple gesture. Ham and Swiss, no tomatoes, mustard instead of mayo. I pay attention too. She retrieved the sandwich and ate it quietly while Max explained what they were watching, something about deep ocean exploration. Daniel noticed she was wearing the wedding ring, even though she was home, even though there was no one to perform for. How did Paris actually go? He asked during a commercial. They're placated for now. The marriage helped. Apparently I'm more stable as a married woman. The sexism is exhausting. She paused. Bradley's been fired. The board voted yesterday. Good. He's threatening to sue. Says I manipulated the situation, used my feminine wiles to turn the board against him. Let him try, Daniel said. He's the one who stole your shoes. You really fixated on that detail. It was cruel. Petty. It says everything about who he is as a person. Max had fallen asleep again, this time with his head in Daniel's lap. Olivia watched them with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. I should take him home, Daniel said softly. School tomorrow. You could stay, Olivia offered, then quickly added, I mean, there are 4 guest rooms. It's late, and Max is already asleep. Daniel looked down at his son, then at Olivia, alone in this massive, empty penthouse. Okay, he said. We'll stay. He carried Max to one of the guest rooms, which was bigger than their entire apartment. The bed was enormous, The sheets probably had a thread count in the thousands, and Max barely stirred when Daniel tucked him in. When he returned to the living room, Olivia had poured 2 glasses of wine and was standing by the windows looking out at the city lights. "This is what I worked for," she said as he joined her. "This view, this success, this proof that I could make it without my parents' help or approval. And it's the loneliest place in the world at 3 in the morning." They stood in comfortable silence, sipping wine, watching Chicago sparkle below them. "Thank you," Olivia said suddenly. "For this week. For the marriage, yes, but more than that. For letting me into your life, into Max's life. For making me feel like I could belong somewhere." "You do belong," Daniel said without thinking. She looked at him, and for a moment the air between them shifted, charged with possibility. She leaned toward him slightly, and he found himself leaning too, drawn by something stronger than logic or contracts. Then a siren wailed on the street below, breaking the spell, and they stepped apart. "I should get some sleep," Olivia said quickly. "Long day tomorrow." "Right, of course," but neither moved. They stood there, 2 people bound by law but separated by circumstance, wanting something they couldn't quite name. "Daniel," Olivia started, then stopped. "Never mind. Good night." "Good night, Olivia." She headed toward her bedroom, pausing at the hallway. "The coffee maker is complicated, but there's a French press in the cabinet. Coffee's in the freezer. Don't ask, it's a thing. And Daniel, thank you for making me a sandwich. No one's done that for me in a very long time." After she left, Daniel stood at those windows for a long time, looking at the city, thinking about the strange turns life took. A week ago, he'd been a struggling single father. Now he was married to a billionaire, standing in a penthouse, feeling things he hadn't expected to feel for years. His phone buzzed. "Mrs. Chen. How is your wife? Did she make the presentation?" He smiled, texting back. "She made it. She's good." "Good. A woman who flies from Paris for a child's school project is a woman worth keeping." Daniel looked down the hallway where Olivia had disappeared, then at the door behind which his son slept peacefully in luxury he'd never imagined. Worth keeping. If only it were that simple. Friday morning arrived with Max bouncing on the guest bed, excited about waking up so high above the city. "Dad, you can see the lake from here, and I think that's Wrigley Field." Daniel groaned, checking his phone. 6:30 a.m. 5 more minutes, buddy. Olivia's making breakfast. It smells amazing. That got Daniel up. He found Olivia in the kitchen, wearing different pajamas but the same exhausted expression, making what appeared to be French toast. "I can actually cook 3 things, she announced without turning around. "French toast is one of them. I figured I owed you breakfast after all the dinners." She'd set the dining table, the formal one that looked like it had never been used, with actual china and silverware. Max was already seated, drinking orange juice from a crystal glass like it was completely normal. "This is fancy," Daniel said, accepting the coffee she handed him. It was perfect, strong, with just the right amount of cream. "I pay attention too," she said with a small smile. The French toast was actually excellent, and they ate like a real family, Max chattering about school, Olivia asking questions, Daniel watching it all with a strange ache in his chest. This was what he'd missed. Not just having a partner, but having someone to share the morning routine with. Someone who cared whether Max had his homework and remembered that he had art class on Fridays. "I have to go to Detroit this weekend," Olivia said as they were clearing the dishes. She washed, Daniel dried, Max put away after being shown where everything went. "Hotel crisis. But I was thinking, if you're not busy, you could come? Both of you? The hotel has an amazing pool and there's a science museum nearby." "Can we, Dad?" Max asked excitedly. "I've never been to Detroit." Daniel looked at Olivia, who was studiously focusing on scrubbing a pan. "This isn't a business thing? The meeting's only Saturday morning. The rest would just be, us, if you want." "We want," Max said before Daniel could answer. "Right, Dad." "Right," Daniel agreed, ignoring the voice in his head warning that this was getting too real, too fast. "We want." They drove back to their apartment to get ready for school and work. Olivia followed in her car, saying she needed to shower and change anyway. While Daniel helped Max find his library book and Olivia used their small bathroom, everything felt surreally domestic. "Your shower pressure is amazing," she said, emerging with wet hair and wearing borrowed clothes, Daniel's jeans and Sarah's Columbia University sweatshirt that had been in the donation bag. "You look different," Max observed. "More normal." "Thanks, I think." "It's a compliment," Max assured her. "You look like someone's mom now." Olivia's expression flickered with something, pain, hope, before settling into a smile. "Well, I'm someone's stepmom, so that works." As they all left together, Mrs. Chen was in the hallway. She took in the scene, the three of them looking like a family, and smiled knowingly. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes," she said to Olivia, who startled at the name. "You look well rested." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." "Will you be joining us for building game night tomorrow? Daniel always comes, but it would be nice to have another good player. These old men, they think they know everything about poker." "We're going to Detroit," Max announced. "Olivia has a hotel there, and there's a science museum and a pool." "How wonderful," Mrs. Chen said, her eyes twinkling. "Family trips are important." In the car, driving Max to school, Daniel caught Olivia's eye in the rearview mirror. She was sitting in the back with Max, helping him practice spelling words. And for a moment, just a moment, Daniel let himself imagine this was real. That she was his wife, not just legally, but truly. That Max was getting a second chance at having a complete family. That the three of them were building something lasting. "Dad, you missed the turn," Max pointed out. Daniel shook his head, focusing on the road. This was temporary. A business arrangement. He couldn't afford to forget that, no matter how real it felt. But as they pulled up to the school and Olivia kissed Max's forehead for luck on his spelling test, a gesture so natural neither of them seemed to notice it, Daniel wondered if maybe, just maybe, some of the best things in life started as accidents. "See you tonight," Olivia said through the window. "I'll pick you both up at 6. Pack swimsuits. As she drove away, Max said, "Dad, I think she really likes us." "Yeah, buddy," Daniel agreed, watching her car disappear into traffic. "I think she does." What scared him wasn't that Olivia might be pretending. What scared him was the growing certainty that none of them were pretending anymore. The drive to Detroit took 4 hours, with Max providing running commentary on everything from wind farms to the history of the automobile industry, which he'd researched specifically for this trip. Olivia had picked them up in a different car, a comfortable SUV instead of the intimidating Mercedes. And she let Max choose the music, which meant they listened to an eclectic mix of classical pieces from Cosmos and modern pop songs he'd heard at school. "Did you know," Max said somewhere around Battle Creek, "that Detroit has the oldest aquarium in the country? Built in 1904. Can we go?" "We can go wherever you want," Olivia said, glancing at Daniel. "Well, within reason." "What's the hotel like?" Max asked. "Is it fancy like your apartment?" "It's different. It's one of my restoration projects, a 1920s building that used to be a department store. We kept all the original architecture but modernized everything else. There's actually a telescope on the roof." "Really?" Max practically vibrated with excitement. "Really? The city lights make it hard to see much, but you can definitely see the moon and some planets." Daniel watched her interact with his son, the easy way she'd learned to navigate his intensity, his questions, his peculiar mix of child and old soul. She never talked down to him, never dismissed his interests, never seemed impatient with his endless curiosity. "You're good with him," he said quietly, while Max was absorbed in watching the landscape change. "He makes it easy," Olivia replied. "He's just himself. No pretense, no games. It's refreshing. Most people find him exhausting. Most people are idiots." They arrived at the hotel just as the sun was setting, painting the restored brick facade gold. The Mercer Detroit was smaller than Daniel had expected, boutique-sized with Art Deco details lovingly preserved. The doorman greeted Olivia by name, his face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "Miss Mercer, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "Change of plans, Robert. This is my husband Daniel and our son Max." "Our son." The words slipped out so naturally that Daniel wasn't sure she'd even noticed saying them. But Max had. His eyes widened slightly, and a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Their suite was on the top floor, not the penthouse, but close enough, with 2 bedrooms, a living area, and windows overlooking the river. Max immediately gravitated toward the telescope mounted near the window, checking its specifications with the intensity of a quality control inspector. "This is a good one," he announced. "Not research grade, but definitely better than mine at home." "High praise," Olivia said, setting down their bags. "The restaurant downstairs is excellent, or we could order room service if you're tired from the drive." "Room service," Max said immediately. "I've never had room service." They ordered too much food, burgers and pasta and salads and desserts, and ate sitting on the floor around the coffee table while watching a documentary about the Mars rover that Max had been wanting to see. It felt like a family vacation, the kind Daniel had always imagined taking but never could afford. After Max had fallen asleep in his room, exhausted from the drive and the excitement, Daniel and Olivia sat on the suite's small balcony, looking out at the Detroit lights. "Thank you for this," Daniel said, "for including Max." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Olivia said simply. "Is that okay? That I wanted to?" "It's more than okay. It's just, this is supposed to be fake, right? A business arrangement? But this doesn't feel fake." Olivia was quiet for a long moment. "No," she finally agreed. "It doesn't." "So what are we doing?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I know what we agreed to. I know what the contract says. But when I was in Paris, all I could think about was getting back for Max's presentation. When I'm at the office, I find myself looking at that photo of us on my desk and forgetting it's staged. When I wake up in that empty penthouse, I wish I was waking up to the sound of Max explaining something about neutron stars over breakfast." Daniel's heart was racing. "Olivia?" "I know," she said quickly. "I know this complicates everything. I know you're still grieving Sarah. I know this was supposed to be simple, but nothing about this week has been simple, has it?" "No," Daniel agreed. "It hasn't." They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken possibilities hanging between them. Finally, Olivia stood. "I should review my notes for tomorrow's meeting. The manager here is new, and there are some issues with the renovation of the ballroom." "Olivia," Daniel called as she reached the door, "we'll figure it out. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out." She smiled, soft and vulnerable. "Promise." "Promise." Saturday morning came early, with Olivia already gone to her meeting when Daniel and Max woke up. She'd left a note. "Breakfast buffet downstairs is incredible. Try the waffles. Pool opens at 9. Be back by lunch." Oh, the breakfast buffet was indeed incredible, and Max ate his weight in waffles while chattering with the chef about the physics of getting them perfectly crispy on the outside while fluffy inside. The entire staff seemed to know who they were, or at least who Max was. "Ms. Mercer's son," he heard one server whisper to another, and neither he nor Max corrected them. The pool was nearly empty, just them and an elderly couple doing water aerobics. Max, it turned out, swam like a fish, something Daniel hadn't known because they could never afford pool memberships or swim lessons. Sarah had taught him during a brief stint when they'd had a YMCA membership, before the medical bills started. "Watch this, Dad," Max called, doing increasingly elaborate dives and tricks, his joy infectious. Daniel was floating on his back, eyes closed against the chlorine, when he heard Max shout, "Olivia! You're back! Come swim with us!" He opened his eyes to find Olivia standing at the pool's edge in her business suit, looking uncertain. "I don't have a swimsuit," she said. "The gift shop has them," Max pointed out. "They have everything. I saw when we walked by." 20 minutes later, Olivia emerged from the changing room in a simple black one-piece, looking self-conscious in a way Daniel had never seen her. "I haven't swum in years," she admitted. "Not since college." "It's like riding a bike," Max assured her, "except wetter." She laughed and slipped into the water, gasping at the temperature. Within minutes, Max had her engaged in an elaborate game of Marco Polo, their laughter echoing off the tiles. Daniel watched them, This woman who ran an empire and his brilliant, peculiar son, playing like they'd known each other for years instead of days. "Marco!" Olivia called, eyes squeezed shut, arms outstretched. "Polo!" Max giggled, easily evading her grasp. She spun toward his voice, lunging forward, and caught him in a hug that turned into a splash war. When they finally called a truce, both breathless and grinning, Olivia's carefully styled hair was a wet mess and her makeup was gone, and she looked more beautiful than Daniel had ever seen her. "Your turn, Dad," Max announced. "You're Marco." They played until the elderly couple complained about the noise, then continued more quietly until Max's fingers were pruny and his lips were turning blue. As they wrapped themselves in the hotel's plush towels, Olivia said, "I've had board meetings that were less exhausting than keeping up with you, Max Hayes." "But this was more fun, right?" Max asked. "Infinitely more fun," she agreed. They had lunch at a small diner Olivia knew about. Nothing fancy, just good food and comfortable booths. Max drew on the paper placemats while they waited for their food, creating elaborate star maps from memory. "That's actually accurate," Olivia said, impressed. "How do you keep all of that in your head?" "Mom taught me a trick," Max explained. "She said the stars tell stories, so if you remember the stories, you remember the stars." "Like, see Orion? He's hunting, right? So he needs his dogs, that's Canis Major and Canis Minor. And he's fighting Taurus the bull. Once you know the story, you can't forget where they are." "Your mom sounds like she was an amazing teacher," Olivia said carefully. "She was," Max agreed matter-of-factly. "Dad says I get my brain from her and my stubborn from him." "Hey," Daniel protested. "I prefer determined." "That's just a fancy word for stubborn," Max said, and Olivia laughed so hard she nearly choked on her coffee. After lunch, they went to the Science Museum as promised. Max was in heaven, dragging them from exhibit to exhibit, explaining things the placards didn't mention, correcting a few that he insisted were outdated. Olivia kept up admirably, asking questions that made Max think, challenging him when he made assumptions. At the planetarium show, sitting in the dark watching stars wheel overhead, Daniel felt Olivia's hand find his. He squeezed gently, and she squeezed back, and they sat like that through the entire show, connected in the darkness while Max whispered facts about each constellation as it appeared. By evening, they were all exhausted. They ordered pizza to the room and watched movies, Max falling asleep halfway through the second one, his head on Olivia's shoulder, his feet in Daniel's lap. "We should move him to bed," Daniel whispered. "In a minute," Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is nice." "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "It is." When they finally did carry Max to bed, it took both of them. He was getting so big. Olivia stood in the doorway watching Daniel tuck him in. "He loves you so much," she said softly. "He's my whole world," Daniel replied. "He's been the only thing keeping me going since Sarah died. The only reason to get up, to work, to try." "Not the only reason anymore," Olivia said, then seemed to catch herself. "I mean, you have the contract now, financial stability." "That's not what you meant," Daniel said, stepping closer to her. "No," she admitted. "It's not." They stood there in the doorway of Max's room, close enough that Daniel could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could smell the chlorine still clinging to her hair mixed with her perfume. "This is getting complicated," Olivia whispered. "It was always complicated," Daniel replied. "We just pretended it wasn't." She reached up, her hand touching his cheek gently. "I don't want to pretend anymore." "What do you want?" "Things I shouldn't. Things that weren't in the contract. Things that could ruin everything if they went wrong." "What if they went right?" She looked at him for a long moment, then rose up on her toes and kissed him. Not for show, not for cameras or board members or anyone else. Just for them, soft and uncertain and real. When they pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Olivia stepped back. We should sleep. Long drive tomorrow." "Right," Daniel agreed, though every cell in his body wanted to pull her back. They retreated to their separate rooms, and Daniel lay awake for hours, touching his lips where she'd kissed him, wondering how something that started as a lie could feel like the most truthful thing in his life. Sunday's drive home was quieter, all three of them lost in their own thoughts. Max dozed in the back seat, worn out from the weekend's activities. Olivia drove while Daniel navigated, and they talked about safe things: the weather, Max's upcoming school play, the restoration challenges at the Detroit hotel. As they neared Chicago, reality seemed to settle back over them like a familiar but unwelcome blanket. Tomorrow, Olivia would return to her penthouse, to board meetings and business dinners. Daniel would go back to driving rideshare, to struggling with bills, to being a single father in everything but legal status. "I have to go to New York on Tuesday," Olivia said as they pulled up to Daniel's building. "Just for 2 days. Annual investor meeting." "Okay," Daniel said, though it wasn't, not really. He'd gotten used to her presence, to the way she fit into their lives. "I was thinking," she continued, not looking at him, "when I get back, maybe we could talk. About the arrangement, about adjustments that might need to be made." "Adjustments? To the contract? To the parameters of our relationship?" Before Daniel could respond, Max woke up, yawning hugely. "Are we home?" "We're home, buddy," Daniel confirmed, though he wasn't sure which home Max meant anymore. They unloaded the car together, Olivia helping carry bags up the 3 flights of stairs. At their apartment door, she hugged Max goodbye, promising to FaceTime him from New York to hear about his school play audition. "Bye, Olivia," Max said, then paused. "Is it okay if I call you Liv?" Olivia is really long. She looks stunned, then pleased. Liv is perfect. Max disappeared inside to use the bathroom, leaving Daniel and Olivia alone in the hallway. "Thank you for this weekend," Daniel said. "It was perfect." "It was, wasn't it?" She smiled sadly. "Maybe too perfect. It's going to make tomorrow harder." "Tomorrow's always hard, but we keep going anyway." She kissed his cheek, lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Good night, Daniel. Good night, Liv." She smiled at the nickname coming from him, then headed down the stairs. Daniel watched until he couldn't see her anymore, then went inside to find Max setting up his telescope by the window. "Dad, do you think Liv will really call from New York?" "I think she will." "Good. I want to tell her about the binary star system I found. She'll think it's cool." Daniel ruffled his son's hair. "She really will think it's cool." "That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Finding someone else who thinks the same things are cool that you do?" "Yeah," Max agreed. "Mom would have liked her." The statement hit Daniel unexpectedly, tears pricking his eyes. "You think so?" "Definitely. Mom always said you needed someone who could keep up with us. Liv keeps up." That night, after Max was asleep, Daniel pulled out the contract he'd signed just a week ago. 1 year, it said. Separate lives that occasionally intersected for appearances. A business arrangement, nothing more. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Made it home. The penthouse feels emptier than usual. Thank Max for the constellation lesson. I'll never look at Orion the same way." He texted back, "Max says to look for Mars tonight. Should be visible from your windows." Looking now. Found it. Telling myself it's red because of iron oxide, not because it's blushing at being observed. Max would be proud of that joke. I learned from the best. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Liv. Monday arrived with its usual chaos. Daniel had an early morning rideshare pickup, then had to race to get Max to school, then more rides until pickup time. Normal life, except for the wedding ring on his finger and the way his phone felt heavier, waiting for messages that didn't come. Olivia was busy. He knew that. She had a company to run, a reputation to maintain. The weekend had been an anomaly, not the new normal. But then, just as he was picking up a passenger from O'Hare, his phone rang with a FaceTime call. Olivia calling for Max as promised, right at 3:30 when he got home from school. "Liv!" Max shouted excitedly when Daniel answered and handed him the phone. "Guess what? I got the part of the science officer in the school play. It's about a spaceship that gets lost and has to use constellations to find its way home." "That's perfect for you." Olivia's voice came through, genuine excitement clear. "When's the performance?" 2 weeks. "Will you be back?" "I wouldn't miss it." Daniel drove while Max chattered to Olivia, telling her about his day, his audition, the binary star system he'd observed. Through the rearview mirror, he could see his son's animated face, the joy of having someone else to share his excitement with. "Dad wants to talk to you," Max announced suddenly, shoving the phone at Daniel just as he was pulling up to a passenger. "I'm driving," Daniel said quickly. "Can I call you back?" "Of course." "Drive safe." The passenger, a middle-aged woman heading to a doctor's appointment, noticed his wedding ring. "Newlywed?" she asked. "What makes you say that?" "The way you smile when your wife calls." "My husband still smiles like that, 30 years later." Daniel thought about denying it, explaining the situation, but instead just said, "Yeah." "Pretty new." "Hold on to that," the woman advised. "The smile, I mean. It's easy to lose in the day-to-day, but it's the most important thing." That evening, Daniel called Olivia back after Max was in bed. She was in her hotel room, looking tired but pleased. "The meetings went well," she reported. "Everyone's impressed with the stability of my personal life. The stock is up 3 points." "Because you got married." "Because I appear to have my life together." Apparently being a workaholic spinster was bad for the brand. "You were never a spinster." In their eyes, I was. 38, unmarried, childless. Might as well have had cats. "Do you like cats?" "I'm allergic." "Which is probably for the best. Can you imagine me as a cat lady?" "I can imagine you as anything you wanted to be." There was a pause, then Olivia said softly, "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." "That's sad." "Or maybe you're just nicer than most people." They talked for another hour, about everything and nothing. About Max's play, about the New York meetings, about the weather and traffic, and 100 small things that couples talk about. Normal things, real things. "I should let you sleep," Olivia finally said. "Early meeting tomorrow." "When are you back?" "Wednesday evening. I was thinking, would you and Max want to come to the penthouse for dinner Thursday? I could cook." "Well, I could try to cook. Or we could order in and I could pretend to cook." "We'd like that. Either version." "Good. It's a date." "Well, not a date. A dinner. A family dinner. Is that what it is?" "Let's just call it Thursday dinner and not overthink it." "I'm excellent at overthinking things." "I've noticed." She laughed, soft and warm through the phone. "Good night, Daniel." "Good night, Liv." Tuesday was harder. No calls, just a few texts. Olivia was in back-to-back meetings, dealing with some crisis in Boston. Daniel drove longer hours, trying to make up for the time he'd taken off for Detroit. Max worked on his lines for the play, practicing in front of the mirror with serious determination. "Do you think Liv will help me practice?" he asked over dinner. "I'm sure she will. She's good at voices. She did all different ones when we were playing Marco Polo." Daniel smiled at the memory. "She was pretty good at Marco Polo." "For someone who hasn't swum in years," Max added, mimicking Olivia's tone perfectly. "Don't make fun." "I'm not." "I like her voice. It's smooth, but not fake smooth. Tommy's stepmom has fake smooth voice. Liv's is real smooth. That's very specific." "Words matter," Max said seriously. "Mom always said that. Use the right words and people understand you better." Wednesday dragged. Olivia's flight was delayed, then delayed again. She texted apologies, saying she'd probably land too late to see them. Daniel told her it was fine, they'd see her Thursday, but Max's disappointment was palpable. "She's busy," Daniel reminded him. "She has a big job, lots of responsibilities." "I know," Max said quietly. Mom was busy too, before she got sick. The comparison hung in the air, unspoken implications heavy between them. Daniel pulled Max into a hug. "Liv's not going anywhere," he promised, hoping it was true. "How do you know?" "Because she promised to help you with your lines. And Olivia Mercer doesn't break her promises." At 10:30 that night, just as Daniel was about to go to bed, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find Olivia still in her business clothes, looking exhausted but smiling. "I know it's late," she said quickly. I wanted to see you, both of you." "Is Max asleep?" "Yeah, but can I just peek in?" "I won't wake him." Daniel led her to Max's room where she stood in the doorway, watching him sleep with his stuffed elephant, surrounded by glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling. "I missed you guys," she whispered. Is that crazy? I've known you less than 2 weeks, and I missed you. It's not crazy, Daniel said, pulling her gently away from Max's door. We missed you too. They stood in his small living room, and Olivia looked around at the familiar chaos: Max's homework on the table, Daniel's ride-share paperwork, the normal detritus of their life. This feels more like home than my penthouse, she said. Stay, Daniel offered impulsively. The couch is comfortable. You can surprise Max at breakfast. I shouldn't. It would confuse things. Things are already confused. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, just tonight. Daniel got her pillows and blankets, the same ones from that first night. When he handed them to her, their fingers brushed and they both froze. Daniel? She whispered. I know, he said. Thursday. We'll talk Thursday. But Thursday felt very far away when she was standing in his living room looking like she belonged there. When the pull between them was so strong, it felt like gravity. Good night, she said firmly, stepping back. Good night, he agreed, forcing himself to walk to his bedroom. But sleep didn't come easily, not with her just down the hall, not with the memory of their kiss in Detroit, not with the growing certainty that what had started as a business arrangement had become something neither of them had planned for. Thursday morning, Max's shriek of delight when he found Olivia asleep on their couch was probably heard 3 buildings over. Liv! You're here! Dad lives here! I see that, buddy. Let her wake up slowly, but Olivia was already sitting up, smiling despite her obvious exhaustion. Good morning, Max. Surprise. The best surprise! Can you help me practice my lines? Can you make breakfast? Can you— Max, Daniel interrupted gently. Let her have coffee first. Right, coffee, I'll make it. As Max busied himself with the coffee maker, he knew exactly how both Daniel and Olivia took theirs. Olivia looked at Daniel with soft eyes. Thank you for letting me stay. Thank you for wanting to. They had breakfast together, Olivia helping Max with his lines while Daniel got ready for work. It was domestic and normal, and everything Daniel had been afraid to want again. See you tonight? Olivia confirmed as she left for her office. 6 o'clock? We'll be there. She kissed Max's forehead, hesitated, then kissed Daniel's cheek. Have a good day. After she left, Max looked at Daniel seriously. Dad, are you and Liv falling in love? The question caught him completely off guard. What makes you ask that? You look at each other the way people do in movies before they kiss. Also, Mrs. Chen says love makes people stupid, and you forgot to pack my lunch today. Daniel looked at the counter where Max's lunch should be and laughed. I did forget. So are you? Falling in love? Daniel thought about lying, about maintaining the fiction, about protecting everyone from the complicated truth. But Max deserved honesty, as much as Daniel could give. I might be, he admitted. Is that okay? Max considered this seriously. Will she live with us? I don't know. We haven't figured everything out yet. Will she want to change things? Make us move, or go to different schools, or stop having pizza Fridays? No, Daniel said firmly. Anyone who loves us has to love our life too, pizza Fridays and all. Then it's okay, Max decided. Besides, she needs us. What do you mean? She's lonely, Dad. You can see it when she thinks no one's looking. She gets this sad face, like she's remembering something that hurts. We make her not lonely. Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought, hugging his too-wise son. That evening, standing outside Olivia's penthouse door with Max, who was wearing his best shirt and carrying a bouquet of flowers they'd bought from the corner store. Women like flowers, Dad. Everyone knows that. Daniel felt like he was standing on the edge of something momentous.